Dylan, welcome.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. You're my first man I've had on since Jordan, so I'm really excited. I have a bunch more men I want to get on, but it just has so worked out that it's been mostly women, and so I'm really happy to have some more masculine energy coming through.
That's awesome. I mean, I kind of feel like if I'm following Jordan, like that's a hard show to follow, you know?
Oh, no, no, no. You have very different energies. Um, I'm gonna surprise you with where I want to begin, I think. But
Okay.
since I talked to your wife, and for anybody who does not know, she was on my episode three, maybe, was Dominique. Um, she told me that at one point in your life, you wanted to become a priest. And I need to know this part of your life, so I'd love to start there. If you could tell us that
Yeah,
story.
okay. How deep do I go? So, kind of like the TLDR is in my hometown, like Catholic is a title, but then everything was kind of like broken up according to ethnicity. So like there was this, my dad, the Irish Catholic, married my mom, the German Catholic, and that was a controversy. But then eventually it became like, this Catholic identity was the difference. And
Where did you grow up?
Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Oh,
So if you're going north out of Chicago, as soon as you cross into Wisconsin, you're in Kenosha. That's
is that
where
like
that's where I grew up.
rural Wisconsin? Or is it near
Well, it's
the
the fourth largest city in
university?
Wisconsin, and
Oh,
but it's very
I've
rural.
never
Like
heard of it.
the fourth largest city in Wisconsin's not like like that's yeah, that's not a huge distinction. But I
Okay.
grew up right on the edge of the urban rural divide, so to speak.
Okay. So
Um,
you had Catholic and Catholic parents, but different kinds of Catholic?
yeah, so like the TLDR on that is that Catholic became an identity. It started off as an ethnicity thing, and then became an identity. So like there were different churches that were like this was the Irish, or this is where the Germans went, this is where the Polish went,
Got it.
and so by the time that I was in high school, that had mostly gone away. And but what had stayed was this we're Catholic and this really strong sense of Catholic identity. And we had a teacher who was there who was like he was a Carmelite. He was really strict on like Catholic dogma and stuff like that. And I found him he was very charismatic. And so for me growing up, it was this great thing of like my pride was in my identity from my family, which was this Catholic thing. And I was looking around of like, I want to serve, I want to be part of the community. But I also, if we're going to be entirely revealed, I really like to be judgmental and like, I'm a step above of everyone
Mm.
else because look at how holy I am. And so the idea of, well, let's be a priest made sense. And so when it came time to choose a university, I chose to go to a Jesuit university because, well, if you're going to be a priest, you may as well be the problematic type of priest, which is the Jesuits. So like
I
in
really
the
understand what Jesuits are.
yeah, so the Catholic Church is an amalgamation. So like most people are familiar with Roman Catholicism. My wife was actually raised Maronite Catholic, which is a different part of Catholic. So like in my churches, it's the standard Vatican stuff, but for her flavor of Catholic, like the masses are in Aramaic, and the priests can be married if they're married before they take holy orders. And then there's also the orders, the Benedictines, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and they all have like this thing that they're focused on. The Jesuits are focused on education and social service. So, like, if you ever see, like, if you're looking at pictures of the civil rights movement, it's particularly in Milwaukee because that's where the university is. You'll notice there's a priest in the front. They're all Jesuits because in their mind, if the police were going to open fire or somebody was going to start a riot, they'd be a casualty, which would put it on the front page of the newspaper. That's
Well,
the type of people the Jesuits are.
okay. So Jesuits are Catholic, but they're like
Correct.
an extra do good kind of Catholic. Is that a way to?
They're You can kind of think about it like this: like there's the United States Army, right? And inside the army, there's the Rangers and the Airborne and the combat. And the the Jesuits would be the combat engineers,
Okay.
right? They were founded as a counter Reformation to Martin Luther. You know, the high idea of like, oh well, they kind of outthought us, and their rhetoric for the Protestant Reformation is better than ours. Let's train a bunch of priests to be super, super intelligent and interested in science and academia, which for a faith-based religion, as you can kind of probably imagine, the Jesuits came to conclusions that the rest of the church didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, one of the phrases that you hear is there's no problem that the Catholics face that can't be dealt with an appropriate number of Jesuits, except, of course, the Jesuit problem.
Okay.
That's who they are.
Okay. When you to before you go on to the rest of your story, when you said you had a Catholic identity when you were young, did you feel rooted in your actual connection with God, or is it more just feeling Catholic as a sense of like this is who we are socially? Because I've been trying to understand. It seems like there's so many people who say they're Christian and they're practicing and they're all these different things, but it doesn't feel like a lot of these people are practicing like the deep connection spiritually. Does that make sense?
All right, we're back.
Oh, you froze. Okay.
I'm back now.
I was like, he's not responding to what I'm saying. Okay, did you hear what I said?
I think I know where you're going of like, you know, there's a lot of people say they're Christian, but it seems to be much more of a cultural virtue signaling marker than it is actually a devotion to the divine.
Yeah, so like for me, I've been finding this connection with God and spirituality and Christianity, and I was baptized Orthodox. And the more that I start reading the Bible, I feel like it doesn't seem to me that a lot of people that I knew growing up who like, you know, Catholic or like church was part of their identity. It doesn't seem that they spiritually were feeling this sort of mystical connection.
Well, my experience with it was absolutely not. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast or not.
You can swear. So
Fantastic.
That's what I'm wondering is, so for you, it's your identity, it's your family's identity, but are you having this spiritual relationship, or what is it to you at that time?
I mean, it's a ritualized, I mean, looking back on what I would have told you at the time is like, oh yeah, I'm totally in touch with God. But now that I've matured, like looking back on it, it was a ritualized form of social control, and it was a ritualized way to separate the us versus them.
Okay.
Right. And so, you know, we're Catholic, which inherently when we say, like, I went to Marquette University, one of their taglines is "We are Marquette." Well, when we say we are Marquette, we're also saying you're not. Like, this is the line of distinction between the us versus them. And that's all it was. And then, of course, you know, there's, you know, the social hierarchy within that church. Oh, well, he reads the Bible and he says the rosary and he goes to mass. And there's all these things you can do, but it has nothing to do with God. It has everything to do with the social order. It has everything to do with being able to try to force people into a very specific modality. And it was actually the process of going to a Jesuit university, reading the Bible cover to cover, studying some scriptural translations, going to a seminary that was like, actually, none of this makes any fucking sense, and I can't possibly be a good person and a good Catholic at the same time. They're mutually exclusive states. And that was the conclusion I came to that made me walk away and say, no, I can't do this.
Did you, because so I've also been wondering about the kinds of people who become priests, because it also has seemed to me that kind of like the way people become therapists. Like, I think a lot of people become therapists because they're sort of messed up on their own, so they go to like study their own neuroses, and then they end up becoming therapists, which doesn't necessarily make them bad therapists. But I've been wondering about priests and how many priests become priests because of this true devout feeling of spiritual connection versus like what you were saying.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good answer for that. What I can say is that if depending on their generational, where they are in the generations, a lot of priests who are much older, how to put this gently, they come off as they would probably have a lovely husband if they were my age. if that makes sense. And this was a place for them to go where, there wasn't going to be, why aren't you getting married? Why aren't you having kids? Like this was, and of
Interesting.
course, when that becomes a refuge, you start to have homogenous groups. Now, is that certainly true for all of them? Absolutely not. Some people, in a lot of the priests I was very close with, I would say went because they wanted that devotion and they wanted that level of service. That said, then my question back to them is, well, then why are we not following the teachings of Christ in the Gospels? Which they don't. So for example, abortion, regardless of what you think about it, if you're going to try to use the Bible as a justification, you kind of can't do it without renegotiating with the text. And
How
so
so?
then, so where in abortion and homosexuality are the two I think that are easiest to see. Abortion, they're pointing to one very specific verse in which Jesus says that before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And that's where the entire idea of at conception it becomes ensouled. That's a new invention. That reading of that verse is something that we all decided kind of collectively in America was a thing in the 1980s. And we're going in again. It's not conspiracy theory if you write it down and publish it. And this is exactly what the moral majority in the early 80s. That was what they wrote. We're reinterpreting and renegotiating this because it creates a social wedge issue to separate us versus them. That was
So are
the
you saying
goal.
that you don't think abortion was uh there was no looking down upon abortion before the 80s? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that's universally true. What I'm saying is that the general zeitgeist of most human cultures had some form of abortions. Going back and looking at Ben Franklin in Poor Richard's Almanac, he has a recipe for abortion. There are verses in Leviticus in which they are talking about how to generate a miscarriage. So that's in the Bible too, right?
Mm.
And so the Bible's not speaking with this univocality. We're picking and choosing and then renegotiating based upon how we wish to structure the powers and values around us. And so we're using abortion as a marker to be able to virtue signal, oh, look, I'm on the right side of things.
Well, personally, I think abortion, I think, is just morally. I've come to now be very pro-life. I've just changed my mind, and I feel that it's just morally wrong. And whenever I hear debates separate from the Bible about abortion, I'm just I cannot be on the side of abortions anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was vehemently pro-life until I left the Catholic Church and was forced to actually have to wrestle with it, both personally and societally and philosophically. And if you if you want a biblical argument on birth, there's a strong case to be made that the soul doesn't enter the body until the baby draws the first breath, independent of the mother. And it's the idea of God breathing life into people. And the breath of life. And when Jesus comes out of the tomb, he breathes upon his apostles. It's a proof of life, a proof that he's here. There's also the argument, if you want to go back to, again, kind of going back to the Founding Fathers era, the idea, and this is an Aristotelian idea, that the baby isn't alive until the quickening. That is when it starts to move, right? So we've, over time, have moved this goalpost all over the place. And we don't have a consensus as to when life begins. And I think in part, specifically in the United States, and Canada would be included in this too, we're a deeply death-phobic society. So we can't even agree in when life ends. And so that would be a question for me on the abortion debate as to when is it okay? When does abortion become not okay? But I think the best place to try to answer that is actually at the end of life. At what point is somebody no longer alive?
Well, expand on that. What do you mean? We don't know we don't agree on when someone is dead.
Well, okay, so kind of going to the Catholic theology, it is considered, let's say you have somebody who, for whatever reason, the corpus of the brain has been destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. No longer functioning. We put them in FRI, nothing's lighting up. They're completely brain dead. But the brainstem's still working. Mm-hmm. Which means that without a ventilator, they can continue to breathe, their heart is continuing to beat, their body is continuing to process food. Under Catholic doctrine, you're not allowed to stop feeding that person, even though there is no way in which that person will ever actually be able to live in any real sense. So in that way, we're pointing and saying life ended at the point in which the part of them, their brain, their ability to think and exist in the world, is no more. And what Catholic theology is saying is like, no, we don't get to say that. We have to keep trying to keep this person alive at all costs. But I think that we can also look at it and be like, but why? Like, from a resource standpoint, this person is now a drain on resources, for one. For two, like, outside of modern medicine, we couldn't keep them alive.
Well, this is,
For
I was
three,
wondering that part of like, that wouldn't have been possible, 100 years ago.
exactly. Exactly. So again, now let's say that this happened 500 years ago. We can't force food down that person's throat. We can't deal with them. They're going to die in at most a couple of weeks. But now with modern interventions, we can put a feeding tube in and keep them alive more or less indefinitely. And so we consider somebody in that hospital bed under these conditions to be alive? And I would say no. That the thing that makes us uniquely human, the thing that makes us able to be human, that brings us into this world and keeps us here, is our ability to perceive and interact with it. And therefore, if the brain function's gone, then they're just the husk, they're just the vessel. The person we loved and cared about has already departed, but the system is continuing to autonomously continue.
What about in my brother's situation where he's in an accident and then in a coma? They think he's completely brain dead, but the one guy decides to operate anyway. And then he's completely in a coma, completely unresponsive for like over a month, and they're just like, he's never going to get any better.
Mm-hmm.
But then he did end up slowly waking up and getting better to a point of now he can interact.
So what I would say is, I don't think I get to make that call.
Well, I'm just curious what you're like. How does that view, or just how does that situation fit into your, like, is he dead then when he's in a coma and not responsive?
I don't know. Like,
Okay.
at the end of the day, I'm not a doctor, but I am saying that, like, if we're looking for a framework, this seems like a good philosophical framework. And now there's tons of debates. Your brother's situations, my brother's situation before he died, would be another great one to kind of, to banter about. The point being is that a definite statement on this I don't think is possible, and I think it's a deeply personal thing that people have to struggle with and come to on their own. And I've told my wife, if I, like, tomorrow I rented a motorcycle, I'm going up the mountains, I'm going to have myself a great time, right? And I'm super excited for it. If God forbid that I were to get in an accident, and there's no realistic, like, maybe a miracle happens. Human bodies do weird things. But if there's no realistic thing, pull the plug and move on. Right? Like, that for me, like, if I'm not going to be able to be capable in this world, and I'm not going to be able to interact, I'm not going to be able to perceive things, like, I'm dead. Even if I still have some wherewithal, like, and I've told my wife, like, well, I've actually taken the decision out of her hands because I don't want her to have to make that decision. But the people who I put it in their hands are doctors, and they know what I want. But at the same time, there are other people who say, no, I do everything possible. I want to live. I want to be here. I want to be with you. I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong any more than I'm going to tell somebody who says it's time to pull the plug, right? Or, let's get even more controversial. I know you love that stuff. So, like, what about things like assisted suicide?
That's what I was going to ask you. We have that in Canada. Is that in the States at all, or no?
No.
It's quite common in Canada. Like, you can just do it basically if you're severely depressed. You could do it.
And in my mind, like, and I've told you this, I've said this to you before, like, my principle is always you're trying to maximize freedom. If that's what an adult wants to do, like, am I comfortable with it? No, I'm not. But I'm also not going to tell them that that's what they can't do. And if I look historically throughout through humanity, there were plenty of assisted suicides or way for people to exit stage left at different times. That might make us in a death-phobic culture deeply uncomfortable, And yet it still happened. And yet infanticide was still a way that some human groups, enforce birth control.
Hmm.
After the baby's born, leaving it to hang out, with the eagles. We all kind of know where that goes. So like when I look at this and I say, if this person's in pain, if they're super depressed and they just want to, like, what's worse, me finding them hanging from the rafters in the garage or them being able to take a painless exit through something else?
Okay, but what happens if, like, what about the fact that when they ban or when they legalized abortions, there became way more abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could I don't know the exact statistics, but I'd imagine that with medically assisted suicide being uh, allowed, that those amount of deaths would increase. You don't see a problem with that happening because, like, a lot of certain people might not go to kill themselves, like hang themselves from the rafters, but with the medically assisted suicide, then they'll do it. You think that's fine?
I mean, again, I'm not here to tell somebody how they're supposed to live or end their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to, do I understand it? Not entirely.
But do you think we have a responsibility to protect certain people? Like, certain people I see, they are like, I read this piece from this girl the one day who was just extremely depressed, and she wrote this whole piece about how she lived somewhere where there's no medically assisted suicide. And she said that she really wanted that to be the case because all she wants is to die, and she doesn't want to just kill herself like in her room. She wants to die in a way where she's surrounded by her family and friends, and it's like legally happening, I guess. And it was this whole piece, and she was just, the way she was describing her depression and all the medications and the whole pathway she's been on, to me, looking at it, I'm like, I don't think that that's a hopeless case of a human.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually heard of people, and I'm not advocating for this, but necessarily, but like certain people have been severely mentally ill and then they go carnivore, right? And they're like, magically they feel way better. So what if that was the case for someone like her, but she would have died without getting that help, or like being encouraged to just change her life, and then she was no longer depressed?
And maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. But who's going to force her to do it? That's the question.
Well, I don't think anyone necessarily should force people. I think it's like but like when we know that those possibilities could exist, is there a responsibility from protecting people in a sense from themselves?
So,
or from those parts of themselves?
So without a mechanism in this particular case, so let's just create a little straw man to play with.
Okay.
We have this person, and you and I are gods, and we know that they're severely depressed, they're suicidal, and if they went on the carnivore diet, they would magically get better.
Okay.
And okay, so that's the setup here.
Uh-huh.
Are we going to step in to force her to do that if she doesn't want to? Even though we know we're gods, we beyond a shadow of a doubt, we know with absolute certainty that a carnivore diet would make her better. Are we going to step in and force her to do it if she doesn't want to do it?
No, I guess not, because that's free will, right?
So then why would we stop her on the other side? And that to me is the biggest thing, is that, like, yes, I do believe we have a vested duty as a society to look out for people and to protect people. I absolutely do. The trade-off we're making, though, is if this is the case, we have to have an enforcement mechanism to make the thing better. Otherwise, we're just making this person suffer.
Well, I agree with that part. I mean, I think sort of, to me, the thing that comes before all of that would be the bigger changes in society so that we don't treat certain things in the way that we currently do. But I still feel like a moral, like if you walked up and you saw someone about to jump off a bridge, isn't it instinctive to try to convince them not to? Or would
Absolutely.
you just be like, I don't know, dude, you're going to do it, I'll just stand by?
I mean, I don't know if Dominique's told you this before, but there are at least 2 people who I've bystander rescued from death in my life.
Know that.
Yeah, one was dying of hypothermia, the other one was drowning. And so, like, I have in fact have been in that situation where I've had to make a choice to get
But they
involved in.
weren't doing it on purpose.
This is true. And if I'm walking down a bridge and I see somebody who's about to jump, my instincts are 100% are going to be in that moment to try to save them.
But why?
And so, well, and this is a thing. I don't know what's caused them to go there. So if we want to go to society, like just hang with me for a second.
Okay.
What's going to bring somebody to that bridge? Maybe it's a heartache. Maybe their boo left them. Or maybe their boss decided that in order to get his bonus, that he was going to lay a bunch of people off. And this guy, the only breadwinner of his family, was laid off so that boss can get his bonus. So what brought him to the bridge in the case of our first case with this woman is she's suffering and she just wants it to end. This guy is now facing an existential crisis so someone else could get rich. Are we going to go tell that guy who laid him off, no, you can't do that. Look at what you're doing. And I don't get to have that conversation in that guy's moment of crisis until I can get him off the bridge. Whereas in the case of a medically assisted suicide, there's a lot of conversation that goes ahead of that. It's not like I just one day are like, yep, we're doing this, and I show up at the suicide booth and put in my quarter and I'm done. There's a process that goes forward with that, at least with the ones that I'm aware of.
Just feel wrong to you?
What specifically?
Like the medically assisted suicide.
There are lots of things in this world that feel wrong to me, that I still think that if I want to live in a free society, I have to allow.
That should be allowed. So you think it's part of being completely free? Because I agree. I do think that there are parts of society that like I don't agree with, but I don't think should be controlled either.
100%. And I think the question is as to to what point are we comfortable with the Leviathan of the state, because that would be who would be stepping in, coming in and enforcing something, and to what point are we not okay with that? And
Well,
so,
yeah,
like, we
there
can.
must be some rules.
I would agree. My big thing when it comes to freedom is I want to try to maximize freedom for the maximum number of people. It's not necessarily a utilitarian idea, but the problem of freedom is that it's fucking scary. Like, to be free inherently means that that person can live according to ways that I find just baffling or abhorrent, or I know would never be right for me. But at the same time, if I'm looking at it, unless they're forcing me to have to be in to do that, then they should be allowed to do it. And so where do we draw those lines? Yes, there's rules, but that's, of course, the whole political debate all the time. Where are those lines? When, if we say we want a free market, but everyone's suffering job loss because their health care is tied to their employment, and getting a new job is actually really difficult, can we say that people are actually free? Or is it just the illusion of freedom to keep us all calm? I would say it's the illusion of freedom. On the flip side, at what point do we want to regulate things such that it'll lock up the market just the same way? Right? There's obviously a tipping point here somewhere, and I have my own thoughts on it, but at the same time, how do I tell someone who's suffering, no, you have to keep suffering? And how do I tell somebody who's suffering, we're going to do this thing you don't want to do, but I know it's going to make you feel better? And so, like, if that's the case, and how do we know that? I mean, we're not gods, we're humans.
Well, how do you think about that? Go ahead.
Well, so like where I'm going with this is, what about conversion therapy? If you believe that homosexuality is inherently going to lead somebody to eternal torment, then conversion therapy seems like compassion. But if you look at them and say, well, this is an orientation that's been part of human experience from the beginning, that's torture.
Well, okay, wait. So before we go into that, the question I was going to ask you is, how do you think about this in terms of parenting? Because you have to have certain rules with your children. Like, there must be certain things that if you see one of your daughters, like, you're not going to just be like, well, you're free.
So with parenting, the only people in this world that I owe anything to are my kids. Right?
Okay.
Because they didn't get a choice. Me and Dominique made a choice that they needed to exist. They didn't
Hmm.
get to do that. So they don't necessarily owe me anything, but I do owe them everything. And so when you're looking at a kid, part of my job as a parent is to prepare them to be free. And that means that I have to teach them how to do it. Like, for example, with toddlers, I can try to be the Leviathan of the state and force them to wear the Superman hoodie. And they don't
Hmm.
want to wear the Superman hoodie. Like, this is the famous thing with toddlers, right? How do you get a toddler to get dressed? And when they're looking at all of their clothes, they're overwhelmed with the choices and they want all of them, which is why like kids put on 8 shirts. So me as a parent, how do I teach them to separate out so that they're not overwhelmed and they're not resistant to, getting on with the day? The answer to that we found was you give them choices. I picked out 3 outfits for you. Which one would you like? Now they're exercising agency, right? My youngest is a notoriously picky eater, right? So me as the only man in the house, everyone else is female. Well, it's me and the dog. Everyone else is female. Our roommate's female. I got 2 daughters. I got a wife, and then there's me. So if I tell my youngest, you have to eat this, I'm the man telling her you don't get a choice to what you put in your body.
Hmm.
Is that the lesson I want to teach her? Or do I want to do the uncomfortable thing and be like, well, I guess she's just going to eat rice again tonight? Right? There's a balance point there. Some people find me to not be helping my kids, but in my mind, I'm helping them. I'm teaching them how to make decisions, and I'm also teaching them that it's okay to say no. Specifically, because I have daughters, say no to a man, and that I'm still going to love them. I'm still going to care about them, and that's okay. And the next lesson, now that my oldest is discovering boys, is to say, like, if they don't like your no, then they're not for you, right? I'm modeling this. There will come a time where my oldest and also my youngest goes out on their own, fucks up in ways that I think were just absolutely stupid, are not going to, like, they're going to have to experiment. They're going to have to learn the hard way a couple of times. All those things are going to occur. And for me as the parent, I will have to look at that and go, well, I did my best I could. And now my job is to help them navigate this thing, not to control them or not to tell them what choices they have to make, but to help them learn how to be able to make the choices that are right for them, even if I disagree.
Right. But do you not think that the government should have any sort of parental role in that way with its citizens?
It absolutely does. I would just draw the lines in very different places.
Okay.
Like, for example, kind of going back to the assisted suicide, I'm not as concerned about the assisted suicide so much as I am as that we've created an anti-human society that hates every human being in it, that is causing them to want to commit suicide in the first place. I don't want to have, typically, like for you, I'll talk about anything with you. But like generally speaking, I don't want to have the debate over assisted suicide or abortion because I dream and I wish to live in a world without abortion, not because it's illegal, but because it's unnecessary. And that's a different place. And this is where people love to play in these other areas, in my mind, of like abortion and assisted suicide, because we don't want to have the other conversation about cars and suburbs and private equity firms and how those things are actually driving these other things along.
So, in saying that, though, there does seem to be, like you said, you'd love to live in a world where there's no abortion and no assisted suicide because people want family and feel loved and happy. So there must be an inherent, like, where do you think that desire for those things come from? Because to me, that's like moralistic in a way.
Can you be more specific on what specifically you're looking for?
Well, like, you're saying that you'd love to live in a society with no abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But why?
Because I believe that if we were able to achieve that without having to like just make it illegal, right? Without having to the Leviathan of the state enforcing that people were to say, no, I'm now pregnant. We have the medical stuff so that we're not going to have, spina bifida. We're not going to have brains that don't develop, fully, right? These are the most common forms for or reasons for late term abortions. we have the medical technologies. We're wielding these wondrous things so that pregnancy is never a death sentence and will always be successful, right? And that women are able to make a choice as to when they get pregnant. I do believe that women should control their reproduction. I don't believe that the pill is a good idea, but like I do believe that women should be the ones saying, yes, I'm ready to be pregnant versus men. So if we were able to create that society, then any pregnancy is a wanted pregnancy with parents that want the child. That's what I want. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I guess it seems like if you're saying that the ideal is to live in a world, let's just, if we do them one at a time, I think is easier. Like if you're saying you want to live in a world where there's no abortion, that says to me that some part of you inherently thinks abortion is wrong.
I think abortion is unfortunate. I'm not going to say that it's wrong or right.
But why would it be unfortunate if
you have somebody who does something that is going to be emotionally taxing, painful, if they're being pushed into a corner where they have to make decisions they know aren't right for themselves, I think we fucked up as a society. Right? Like in a true, like, again, I want to maximize our freedom, and we need to have freedom of and freedom from. And of the two, freedom from is more important. And so what are the, like, I'm not as concerned about the abortion so much as why did we have the abortions in the first place? Let's go have this conversation with the women and actually ask them, what's going on here? What drove this decision? Because if we start seeing a pattern, well, okay, that's the thing we have to go address.
Well, so I think a major problem right now, because like 90% of abortions are just the woman not really wanting to have the child. It's inconvenient.
I could debate, but I don't actually know, so I will just accept that.
Well, I do know now because I've spent a lot of time looking this up. So, but the thing is, like, a lot of women, I think, today are getting abortion, and I have had people specifically tell me this, that it's just like, oh, like, it's just not a convenient time for me to have a child, or I didn't really want one, or I wasn't being that careful with birth control, and oops, I'm pregnant, so I'm just not going to keep it. There's a lot of, like, by far the most of abortions are not necessary in any way.
Okay, so let's just go with that. In my mind, then the question is, why is it not convenient? Like, it's not the abortion that I'm concerned about. It's the why is it not convenient.
I think that this points to a larger societal problem of where we don't really value, like, we had feminism take over, and now we don't value family in the same way.
Feminism is a natural outcropping of industrial capitalism. And basically, we've structured society around that to the point where we are completely atomized and dehumanized at every single level across society.
In that sentence, are you saying feminism comes from capitalism?
Correct. I don't think feminism doesn't arise without it, in my mind.
But weren't we always I've been wondering this too. Haven't we always been a more capitalist society? We have elements of socialist as well, but we've been largely more capitalist, right?
Structurally, I mean, economically speaking, I can't speak for Canada because I've never actually gone and looked, but I would guess it's similar, at least in the United States. Once you get past a certain a certain amount of wealth, you live in the most generous and protective socialistic society ever created. But if you're below that, you are in a cutthroat capitalist environment, essentially. And so I don't think we've always been this way. Certainly at the founding of the nation, capitalism hadn't been a thing. We were still on the mercantilist idea of economics.
What does capitalism mean to you? Like, how are you defining capitalism?
So capitalism would be the ability then for individual entrepreneurs to decide what to produce and in what quantities. And that the flow of capital is dictated by a market force rather than an actual I don't have the right word, but like a state actor, right? The market is, this is the stock exchange, for example, is deciding where the capital is going to flow to, and therefore it is helping inform this. A mercantilist system is purely extraction. I show up at a place, I dominate the population, I strip it of resources, I take it back to my home country, I process the resources, and I take it back to my colony and then make them buy it. That's a mercantilist system.
Capitalist also means that people get to own things independently.
That's true in a mercantilist system too.
Well, I've never seen mercantilism being part of the spectrum. I've only seen it like capitalism and then socialism and then
In a
communism.
modern, from since 1945, that would be an okay way of thinking of it, but that's not historically how it's been. From a European centric perspective, we moved from feudalism to mercantilism into a more capitalistic system. And capitalism arises out of when you start to have an economic system that requires large scale capital investments to make it function, which is industry. That's when you move into capitalism.
Okay, so but it kind of seems like you're talking about more going from smaller scale businesses almost to like corporations.
That is part of the capitalist process, yes.
But does capitalism inherently mean that?
So let's think about the. Well, okay. Have you ever read The Wealth of Nations?
No.
I have. I have this tendency to get my teeth into something and then I can't let it go. On my podcast, I actually have an entire 5-part series breaking down each school of capitalistic thought.
Okay.
And so as part of that, I read The Wealth of Nations. The term invisible hand in The Wealth of Nations is mentioned exactly one time.
Okay.
It was not a central premise of Adam Smith's ideas, right? But what he was talking about at this time, he basically had 3 points. The first one being is that the market seemed to people are showing up in the market, and when he's talking markets, he's talking about like an actual market at the town square. They're making choices. People at their booths are, putting on a show, trying to get people over, and there's a decision making that's kind of organic, and that's where the invisible hand comment came in. The second thing he's talking about is specialization, right? And this is the famous pin story, right? If one person had to try to make a pin, it'd be almost impossible because they'd have to get the ore, smelt the ore, stretch the. But now if you're specialized, all I do is smelt ore. Now people can buy from me this now, and they don't have to buy for just pins. They can buy for nails and horseshoes and all sorts of stuff. So the specialization of an economy inherently, and if there's a need for it, people are then free to enter into that market and start that production.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then his third point is the markets suck sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, there are negative externalities. And the thing that Adam Smith pointed to was landlords. That landlords didn't produce anything. They didn't actually they just were rent seeking. And so when he's talking about a free market, he's talking about a market free of rent seeking, of non-productive income, so to speak, or as we like to term it, passive income. But most people don't read the whole book. Mm-hmm. They skip that. So when we're looking at this, eventually what you're going to have, is if we're making pins, we're eventually going to be like, well, hold on, we got 8 pin makers, let's get together and we'll all be in the same place. Then we're only renting one building. Okay, that's more efficient for us. Okay, well now I raised enough capital and we had 8, we're going to buy out half of them, so now there's only 4, right? We're consolidating. Adam Smith was unable, he just didn't live long enough to watch the consolidation that this type of system inherently produces. So under this type of idea, eventually the innovation needs, in order for the capitalists to continue making their money, the innovation has to stop, because when they're starting up, they want rugged competition. But then once they become successful, they don't want new competition. They don't want to have to innovate. They don't want to do R&D. That's an expense. And so they will then create monopolistic control. And if you're looking for examples of that, Standard Oil with John D. Rockefeller, Van Buren on the railroads, Carnegie on the steel industry, they're all examples of people who were doing just that. Mm-hmm. And then we started having the era of robber barons. Things started locking up. We started seeing massive wealth degradation. And then all that broke, starting with Teddy Roosevelt in the early 1900s. And then what did that issue usher in? The largest period of global economic expansion ever, because capitalism as a concept isn't inherently bad. It's not inherently good, but it's not inherently bad. Mm-hmm. And the natural conclusion is what we've started to term techno-feudalism, where the large corporations consolidate. Now they have the control to be able to dictate terms. Mm-hmm. And so, I guess I'll take a breath and pause there before I start talking about how women play into this.
Well, I agree. I mean, so it sounds like to me that you don't necessarily, you're not saying capitalism is bad, that you don't like it. You're just saying that it has caused some issues that we have to deal with. Yes?
Correct. Correct. And for your audience, I'm a business owner with employees,
Yeah.
right? Like I have people who work for me that I pay a salary, who do work but that I profit off of. So
Mm-hmm.
I am an active participant. I am an entrepreneur and capitalist in this system. And we have to talk about the negative externalities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Under capitalism, it's all about production and profit. A tree is not useful until it's cut down if it's not productive. And
Mm-hmm.
productive would be like a fruit tree,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the pine tree outside my office is not productive unless I cut it down and sell the pieces,
Mm-hmm.
right? A pristine environment, clean air. None of these things are actually profitable. And in fact, if you go with the idea that a corporation's sole job is to make money, then inherently it's their duty then to pollute because it's cheaper to just dump stuff in a river than it is to properly dispose of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's those negative externalities that we have to be sober enough on this to look at and go, yeah, competition, people making decisions, freedom, and a vibrant market. These are good things that drive wonderful innovations. That's what I want. I want to see maximum levels of competition. And inherently that system leads to consolidation, which is inherently bad because inherently they're going to start squeezing and squeezing and squeezing because they stopped innovating and competing.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, capitalism will work only if once you stop consolidations. No, you make pins. You're not allowed to make males too. You can't just buy all the industry in town. No, we're not going to subsidize the gasoline that goes into your car. No, we're not going to make special car routes for this. You have to compete. You have to innovate. That's the
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah. This has been a bit of a concern of mine because I've been thinking about, like, I feel like my views overall have trended much more conservative, like they've been shifting more that way, but a big concern that I have that seems to come along with super conservative style thinking, at least in the way that I have perceived it, is that there are ways that these really big corporations can get very out of control. And there does need to be certain rules and things put in place so that that can't happen. And one in particular, which I have known a lot about because of my brother's situation, is just the way, like, for example, with, are you familiar with Ralph Nader?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm very familiar with Ralph Nader. I had a friend who absolutely loved the Corvair, and then made me read his book.
Oh. Well, so that's been his sort of life's work, right? Has been like fighting against these corporations. And I have been curious. I've actually been wanting to get a copy of his book that he wrote back in the 60s, which is called Unsafe at Any Speed, because he did that big expose on General Motors. And the car that my brother was in, let me be careful about the way that I phrase this legally, is that the car my brother was driving was a GM car that had been recalled, or it was supposed to have been recalled. And allegedly, that was the reason for the accident. So, and the thing is that Ralph Nader's work was able to get a lot of things put in place, like safety regulations that the big companies were not having. However, they're still continuing it. Like, that was back in the 60s, right? And he was getting certain things in place. But, like, fast forward to the 2000s, and they're still able to get away with certain things like that. Like, with this new period of GM's cars and stuff being recalled, no one got in trouble.
Yeah. Same in 08.
Yeah.
Nobody went to jail for any of it. And yeah. So what's the question?
There's no question.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I'm just commenting. I'm agreeing with you in that sense of saying, like, I think there seems to be this problem on the scale of what we have now. But I guess I've been hesitant when I've heard, and this is not what you were saying, but when I've heard people they're like anti-capitalist or they're anti that, I'm like, well, I like a lot of aspects of capitalism. I don't want to be in a super socialist society.
Yeah.
Especially not a communist society.
I mean, to me, there's a question of like, okay, communism, fascism. What's the problem there? It's both on both ends. It's authoritarianism, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been people stop losing the choice in how they're interacting with society. I wouldn't say that I'm a socialist by any extent of the mean, but I would say that I want to maximize freedom. This is one of the reasons why universal healthcare is a single payer healthcare is like a big thing for me because it would increase freedom. It would make me as a small business owner more competitive against the large accounting firms. Right? Part
What
of
do
the
you
reason
mean
that I have trouble hiring.
single payer healthcare meaning like your company isn't responsible for your healthcare?
Correct.
Oh,
Why
okay.
why I'm an accountant, right? So as an accountant, I do people's taxes, I do bookkeeping, I do consulting, I do CFO service. Why am I concerned about healthcare? Why am I trying to pick out what doctors my employees can go see? This is a waste of my time, and this is
Huh.
not helping me enter into the marketplace. And what's worse is that the talent that I could use, if I could attract the talent, I could serve my small businesses better. But I can't because I don't have the scale to offer the health plan that the accounting firm down the street can.
Mm-hmm.
So inherently, by having a quote market system, which we don't, but that's a whole different thing, by having that, we're actually just incentivizing the big dogs to win and the little dogs to lose. And I'm a little dog.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sub $1 million accounting firm. Granted, it's just me and my business partner, and we'll get there. But like,
Yeah.
that's how that works. And it's the same thing. Once you start to see it that way, well, okay, what would be better? And the answer to that question is probably, well, basically anything other than what we're doing, at
Why
least in the
is
United
it that way?
States.
I never really thought about it actually. Like, why is it set up in the way so that your work is paying for your healthcare?
The answer to that question is unions plus World War II.
Okay.
And so basically, when the United States was in the Lend-Lease program, sending all the weapons of war to the Europeans to fight each other, because we funded mostly the Allies, but that was not universally true for sure. The FDR had said, well, we have to put cost controls. And so they put a cap on the wages. So in order for these companies, because we had private companies who were producing these goods, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, Raytheon, like all of these ones, Douglas for airplanes and stuff like that, they put a cap on the wages. And so then the corporations started trying to compete on benefits. This is when benefits became a thing. And so those benefits then, after World War II, you actually had Lyndon Baines Johnson. So Teddy Roosevelt tried to get the very first single-payer healthcare system in the United States, and he was told it was too socialist. And then Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, he tried to do it, but he was only able to get it for the poor and the old. That's Medicaid and Medicare, respectively. And he failed on the general population. And part of the reason he failed was that on the conservative side, no, that's socialism. But then on the workers' side, the unions were negotiating on that point, and they didn't want to lose that benefit to their members, and so they actually lobbied against it as well. And when that failed, after that failed, and then under Nixon, we put it in the tax code that they get a tax write-off against it, thus enshrining it as part of employment. And once entrenched, middlemen never leave unless absolutely forced out of it. So that's the very short explanation as to why it's that way.
Mhm. Do you like private health? Like, do you think healthcare should be private?
I believe hospitals and providers should be private.
Yeah.
And I also believe that they should be at the highest level of transparency, because right now what we have
Yeah.
is private equity firms coming in. And when private equity comes in, they lay off people, care goes down, deaths go up, doctors get squeezed. Nobody wins except for the people who are strip mining the value out of that. And there was an extremely big hospital chain that I don't want to mention because I think they're still in litigation. But when I worked in public accounting, I was part of that team helping them consolidate under private equity. And I remember at the time, like looking at their books and being like, well, there's two things. Number one, in any other industry, this accounting would be fraud. And number two, they're setting themselves up for failure, because one of the things that they did was they came in and they sold all the land the hospitals were on back to themselves so they could bonus themselves out. So the hospital went from having very low overhead to having very high overhead, which then they cut staff and care, which then you can kind of see how that went. And that's very typical. So I believe that the healthcare should be private, but I don't believe that it should be a lot like the people who ultimately control healthcare should be ultimately responsible for the outcomes,
Yeah.
right? So if you're owned by private equity and that healthcare chain goes under, that private equity firm, we're coming after them for the money, right? And I don't care what little legal tricks you do, you were the person in charge. And so there's an accountability piece, because again, kind of going back to capitalism, capitalism works best when the person taking the most risk is winning the most rewards.
Yeah.
And under this particular system, as we see it right now with private equity has all the reward with none of the risk. The employees are bearing the risk and the patients are bearing the risk. And to me, that's not capitalism. That's something else entirely.
Well, I didn't realize until recently that, so I kind of thought, and maybe this is just because how it seemed in my lifetime, but I thought that, America had private healthcare, but we end up paying these, exorbitant bills. Insurance charges so much money. The hospital bills are just so high. And then, of course, I came to Canada where everything is free, quote unquote, and more public. And I thought that the problems with American healthcare were inherent to having private healthcare. And I have recently realized that's not true. We could have private healthcare without having the problems that are currently there in the with the insurance, with health insurance, and with the hospitals and these huge charges. I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, Dominique and I lived in Taiwan for a number of years. And while we were there, she had a severe scooter accident. She hit something, went over her handlebars, knocked out all of her teeth. I actually found her teeth embedded in the concrete.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was ugly. And I didn't know, and her phone had gotten broken in the accident. So I was literally driving around to hospitals, and I walked in, and the guy looks up, and I spoke pretty decent Chinese at the time, but he pointed and went, "Oh, it's the white guy," and so I was like, "Oh, she's here," and so she was there. She was covered in blood and in the hospital bed and really fucked up. And at no point while she was going through that were we ever concerned about a bill. And the whole thing, the ambulance ride, the couple days in the hospital, the therapy, the medications cost us $400 US. And it only cost us that much because I popped so that she could have a private room.
But but in China, they must have
Taiwan.
In Taiwan, yes. What do they have?
They have single payer healthcare. So the hospitals are all privately run, but the health insurance is all done at the government level. And what Taiwan, when they built their system, went around and kind of looked at what do we need to really just kind of get comfortable with? And one of the things that they got comfortable with real quick was this doesn't work without price controls. So that is to say, when they gave Dominique a pill of Tylenol, they were only allowed to charge what the cost of that Tylenol was. Now, fast forward several years later, she's 8 months pregnant, gets in a head-on car crash, right? Impacts the steering wheel, big bruise on her thing. The 5-mile ambulance ride from the scene of the accident, she tried to walk, for one, because she was like, I can't afford this. I just put gas in the car. We were desperately poor at the time. God. And the police were like, nope, you're going in the ambulance one way or the other. So you can go in there or we're going to put you in there. But that 5-mile ride in the United States was $30,000. $30,000.
So why? Why is that the case?
Well, in this particular, because we don't tell them that they can't charge that much. And that hospital, right? that ambulance company is a privately run company who has, under shareholder primacy, which is the way that we think about things in the United States, they have a fiduciary duty, quote unquote, to maximize shareholder value. So in this particular case, Taiwan has looked at it and said, healthcare isn't actually a market, it's a hostage situation. We need to control this. Whereas in the United States, we go, oh, the market will provide, except it's next to impossible to start another ambulance company. And if you have a contract with the city, which is what this is actually the case, the police don't have another ambulance company to call.
When things are corrupt, it doesn't seem like anyone gets in trouble.
Exactly.
There's no real
and so
transparency.
for us in this particular case, Flagstaff Medical Center takes public funds, so I was able to negotiate her bills. But that doesn't change the fact that it was like I had to have the knowledge of accounting to be able to
Right.
negotiate the bills in the first place, and because it was just happened to be in the off season, right? I had just finished teaching and I hadn't started grad school yet. I had the time to go down to the office and argue with the lady for literally 2 days straight.
Yeah.
And so like not everyone's going to have that option to be able to do that, or the knowledge to be able to do that. And then on top of it all, like, you know, they charged her $25 for a pill of Tylenol and $35 for a square of gauze. You know, and the only reason I knew that was because I asked for an itemized list of everything she received. Then I had to go get a key to figure out what the medical coding all said. Then I had to, you know, get receipts and proof that she had in fact got it. And that's how I was able to argue it down. And so when they were sitting there going, well, you owe us $65,000,
Yeah.
you know, I was able to go, well, no, really, the total care was only $500. I'll pay you that. And they went, okay.
Really? That was
Really?
what happened?
So when you look at this, like, how is anyone being served by this?
Yeah.
And so kind of going back to the top of the show, when we're talking about freedom, are we free in that case? Is capitalism working the right way? And so when I look at Taiwan, all I could think about when I was experiencing their medical care was, I want everyone to have this.
Yeah.
I want people when they're in a car accident to be focused solely on their healing. Not on, oh my God, I'm going to lose the house. Oh my God, you know, the bills come forever, right?
Yeah.
You know, like I had a procedure 2 years ago. I'm still getting bills from it.
Yeah, and they just send, yeah, I hate that. You get something done, you don't know what it's going to cost, and then they send it later, and it's like, surprise, oh, by the way, you owe us another $500. It's like,
Well,
what?
and then you can try to do, like in my case, it was in network. Like I went to the insurance company. They're like, yes, this is the place to go. This is in network. Well, the facility was in network, but the doctor was not. Neither was the nurse practitioner or the anesthesiologist or the
Yeah.
medical vendor. So the bed was covered by insurance and everything else was excluded.
Mm-hmm.
And I did quote unquote everything right. And when you start to look at this and you start to say, oh, they actually did this on purpose. This was not a byproduct. Like they hired a consulting company of one of the big four consulting firms, who then came in and created what they call the healthcare playbook. And you know, these long phone labyrinths, we can't talk to anybody, the medical billing code, that was all by design. And so, like, to me, that's not capitalism. No, the only innovation here is to make care worse but more expensive so they can milk you under what should be periods of time where we're focused on healing and community and help and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's not the capitalism I want for myself or my kids.
No.
And
So were you guys, I thought you guys were living in China. You were living in Taiwan?
yes, we were living in Taiwan.
Oh, okay. Um, wow. Yeah. So, because the thing is, I agree with you. I didn't really realize that that was an option, like single payer, because I hate Canada's healthcare system as well. Like, it's free, but we pay so much taxes, so it's not really that free. And it also, like, you don't get very good care a lot of the time, or it takes forever. Actually, I was just talking to a man on the street yesterday who was in a wheelchair, and he told me that, oh, it was really sad. He was just telling, his feet were all swollen. He would just had all these issues, but he told me that every time he has to pee, he has to call a nurse, and maybe she'll come in like 45 minutes. And he wants to get his wheelchair was so shitty, I can't even believe he could move or anyone could even push him in it. And he was like, I really want a new wheelchair, but they say that they have to do more tests to like get me a new wheelchair. And it was like gonna be like a year or two out for him, you know? And I just know that when you get, and I was like, that's how it is. It's free. So that's great for people like him, but it's like the care is not that great either in a lot of cases.
I mean, the care sucks just as much here if you're poor.
Well, it does, yeah.
You know, like I had gout in my feet, both feet for 4 months. And I couldn't go see anybody because I was too poor to afford to pay cash. And my insurance would only cover, what's that?
They didn't cover?
No, they only would cover the rheumatologist in Flagstaff who was not taking new customers, new clients, because he was retiring.
Well, they shouldn't be allowed to do, like, yeah,
Well, they have it as a cost containment measure. So what ended up happening in that situation is I convinced the insurance company to let me go to Prescott, which was a 2-hour drive away from me, to go see the rheumatologist there, who also took that insurance. The day before my appointment, the rheumatologist said, "No, you have an Obamacare policy, and I have a moral objection to Obamacare. So my deeply held religious beliefs means I can't see you."
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up. It was a father of one of my students who saw me on crutches and paid out of pocket for me to see a rheumatologist down in Phoenix that was able to stop that infection. And how long would have gone on had that man not came to my rescue? I have no idea. So
Wow.
but funny story about the Canadian system. When I was in grad school, we went to Calgary to see industry in Calgary. And while we were there, the head of Alberta's provincial healthcare system came to give us a keynote address. And so he did this big question and answers period, and he shit all over the Canadian healthcare system. Just hated the whole thing, blah blah blah. And I got the last question, and my question was, if I could snap my fingers and Canada gets the U.S. healthcare system and the United States gets Canada's healthcare system, do you want me to snap my fingers? And his response was, "God, no, you people are barbaric."
Yeah.
And so yes, there are problems with
Yeah.
Canada's system, but it's anything you say about a Canada system, we could talk ad nauseum about what we have here.
It is terrible at home in the States too, but it's just I thought I was moving to a place where it was going to be just like great. And while I have been relieved in certain ways, I've used it a bunch, and like there's there's also issues with it as well. Um okay, take me back to the beginning, because we started with your priest story and I didn't get to hear the end. So I want to kind of get back there because I'm very curious about your journey in that.
Yeah,
Because you became very disillusioned, it sounds like, with the Catholic Church.
yeah. There were two things that happened simultaneously. The first is Dominique was not the first person I was engaged to.
Oh,
I had started dating this woman. I was too poor to afford a ring, but I said I want to get married. She says I want to get married to you too. I said, are we engaged? She said yes.
right. I
And
think
then
Dominique mentioned this. Maybe I forgot about it.
yeah, well, long story short, she had this. God came and visited her and told her that she had to break up with me.
Right. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and that was kind of devastating to me because why would this like we used to go to church together, we prayed the rosary together. It was very Catholic relationship. And then like 4 weeks later, she had a dream from God that she was to get back with me.
Oh.
And then 2 weeks later, she had a dream from God that she needed to go date this other guy. So and then she came, like, this was a whole thing. It was,
Yeah.
and to be fair to her, we were kids. And I was exceedingly emotionally immature and completely not set up to be able to handle that. And there were no winners and there were no saints. And I will even say there are no victims. There were only perpetrators in this particular case. So that was hard because then, as I'm having this like spiritual crisis, God brought me this woman. We were supposed to get married because that's how the Catholic Church likes to say it. I go to the priest, and his advice to me was, stop thinking about things. Your mind's getting in the way. And it's like, what? Like, this is a Jesuit college. Isn't intellectualism and like, help me come to terms with this. And he's just like, just pray about it. I got to get to the basketball game. And it was like, okay. And then when I went to the next priest, I got basically the same answer. So during that time, like, my whole world kind of just shattered. Like, my perception of the world shattered. I shattered emotionally. I lost like 35 pounds.
How old were
Because
you?
I
Like 21?
almost 20.
20. Okay.
Yeah. So it was my junior year of college. So I just started my junior year of college. Yeah, and like I said, I was emotionally immature and very childish and all the things, right? I bear responsibility for what happened to me there. But what was stark was all of my very religious friends told me, I'll pray for you. and all of my atheist friends showed the fuck up and held me while I was crying. And so the people who were supposed to be with God, who were my people, they were the Catholics, all abandoned me and said, I'll pray for you. And everyone who didn't believe in God or believed in a different God showed the fuck up and were like, hey, dude, you need to eat. And I made you mac and cheese. I know it's your favorite dish. Or hey, you just need to cry and I'm going to hold you. Men, women, like, and that was, so during that time, like that's pretty, you start asking some questions.
Mm-hmm.
And
it would have a big impact if all the people that are supposed to be the spiritual ones don't actually show up and materially help you in real life.
Correct. So that was the first part. That was the first event. The second event was I was taking a Christian theology class because Catholic University, right? And it was taught by this Jesuit, and he was talking about the problem of evil. And he said, you know, his whole thing was like God has three attributes. God's omnipotent, meaning all powerful. It's all knowing and all loving, right? And so in order to be God, you have to have all three. So then from where does come evil, right? If God is all knowing and all powerful and just doesn't care, then that's not a God worth worshiping. And if God's all knowing and all knowing and all loving, but has no ability to deal with it, what's the point in worshiping him? And if God is all powerful and all loving, but has no clue, then God's ignoring us. So to what is the purpose of God? And that idea was planted in my head while this other thing is going on. And I'm like, oh my God, I now have a bigger crisis on my hands. So I went to that priest. He was the teacher. And I found out two things. Number one, he would tell you that maybe God doesn't exist, and he's a priest. He would do mass. He's like, I can't tell you this, so this is an article of faith, but like, I'm not convinced I'm right. And then the second thing he told me was, well, if you're struggling with your Christianity, maybe you should explore it. And so he told me, read the Bible cover to cover like a novel, and take notes, and I'll chat with you about it. And so I did. And what I realized really quickly is that the Bible is not univocal at all.
What do you mean univocal?
Speaking with one voice.
Oh, no.
There are many contradictions right from the get-go inside of the Bible. Genesis chapters 1 through 3, go ahead and read them. You're going to get different and mutually exclusive accounts of what goes on. The flood. Noah's supposed to take the animals 2 by 2, and then 7 of the unclean and, or 7 of the clean and 2 of the unclean. Like, those math is not mathing here. And it's because those stories are coming from different times and traditions. They have a different rhetorical goal. And so as I read through the Bible, I got to the end of it and I was like, fuck. If this is the truth is extremely muddled. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And if we just try to limit it, why are we obsessed with the 10 Commandments, which are all punitive, when we're supposed to be Christians with Christ? And so we just ignore the Beatitudes, which is
we ignore the what?
The Beatitudes.
What's
Blessed
that?
are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
Oh, okay.
That whole list. Blessed are the peacemakers, for God smiles upon them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's Jesus's commands. It's the Sermon on the Mount.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, right from the quote, the metaphorical horse's mouth. So why are we not doing that? Why do we want the 10 Commandments and not the Beatitudes? Was it because if we actually implemented the 10 Commandments, we end up with a police state? But if we implement the Beatitudes, the U.S. military doesn't make the cut? Like, these are all questions that were going through my head. And this is, chronologically, we're in late 2002, so the invasion of Iraq is just happening. Mm-hmm. Several of my friends are leaving university to go join the military. Mm-hmm. Some of my friends are coming back in boxes draped in flags. So all of these ideas that's part of the context for me at this point too. Yeah. And so then this crisis of faith then culminated in, well, I should explore this. So I was like, all right, I'm done being Catholic, but maybe I'm still Christian. Let's go figure this shit out. So I took a year where I went to Orthodox temples. I went to Shriners places.
Did you go to a Greek Orthodox church?
Serbian Orthodox, but yes.
Wow. Do they sing in Serbian? Do they do it?
I don't know what language they sang in, but I know I didn't understand it.
Orthodox church, then okay. I just have wondered about. I've never been to a different Orthodox church other than Greek, so I'm curious what it's like.
My roommate was Serbian.
Okay.
And he was Serbian Orthodox. And so when I was like, "Hey, can I come to church with you?" and he was like, sure." Very, very similar to Catholicism from form and function.
Okay. That
Um,
I've wondered that.
I went to an all black Baptist church, like Baptist Revival Church, which is great because like I was like, oh, what do they wear? They all wear the suit. Okay, I got the suit with a black tie and a shirt, and I go in, and they're doing the worship thing, and they're dancing around, and suddenly the preacher looks over, like we lock eyes, and he goes, "Brothers and sisters, please halt what you're doing. I believe we have a guest here today." And he brings
I
me front and
think I would probably melt of embarrassment if that happened to
Oh,
me.
I didn't know it. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen here. And he brought me to the front of the church and had me introduce myself. They were so friendly. It was
Yeah.
amazing. So I went to a Presbyterian church. I went to a snake handling church. That was entertaining. And just really tried to go with the spirit of curiosity and seeking.
Uh-huh.
And what I found was there's like this feeling that's there. And after my year of exploring Christianity, I started going to Hindu temples and Buddhist temples and Shinto temples. And I went to a couple of mosques, which was weird because it was at that point where 2004 war on terror is going on. So going to a mosque was an entertaining idea. But I went to all these different faiths, and what I found was like when they're breaking bread, when they're singing together, when they're doing these things, there's like this sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
But I was finding that even more around campfires when I was camping with people
Mm-hmm.
or when I was volunteering at a summer camp. And what I kind of came to was, oh, what we're calling God is really just humans doing human shit, right? It's us singing. It's us cooking together. It's us being in contact, to borrow a developmental term. That's what we're feeling. And then we found a way to ritualize it. We found a way to structure power around it. And that's what we ended up calling religion. And I was like, well, if God, so that means that what I'm experiencing as, and for lack of a better term, let's call it God, it's not in the church. And religion has nothing to do with it. Religion is just a rule set and the drapings and all this other stuff. The actual God is the people. It's the community. It's us in tribe and in context, right? Because singing is something we don't do anymore. But I sing to my kids. Like I can literally stand at the top of the stairs and sing one bar of a sea shanty, and Agatha will respond because she knows all the lyrics. When I was in college and around this time, I was spending a lot of time singing. I was known on campus that we would go to this bar called Caffrey's. We get sloshed up, and then me and my buddies would all sing in the back of the bar. And people would come to like hang out with us because we were doing this human thing. And I always had the same feelings there as I did on like Easter Sunday
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And so it was at that time that I was expressing this to a friend of mine, and he said, you're so intelligent. Maybe you should just put aside the God thing and go find yourself.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And that's what I did. And I never went back.
So I want to understand. So I disagree, but I want to understand your point of view more. So when you were seeking all these different parts, like other Christian places, what was driving that seeking?
I really wanted to believe that there was something greater out there. Like there's and this is certainly not a binary. Okay. But for the sake of discussion, you can believe that there's this all-powerful being who's deeply in love with you, who truly cares about you and is trying to guide your life. Right? And for some reason, if you're Catholic, is very concerned about whether or not you're masturbating. Right? And and all the other things. Or you have to believe that nothing actually matters and life is entirely what you make of it. And I really wanted the first one. I really, really wanted to believe that there is this all-powerful divine being who truly loves me, who's looking out for me, and is going. And if I just submit to that being, life is great. Unfortunately, that doesn't. All available evidence doesn't back that up,
Did you
because the
feel
rock.
that you had a connection to what you call this being?
So at the time, again, I would say yes, I did. But in retrospect, it was just being with the humans. right? Standing up in church and singing on eagle's wings. Like, and if for any of your Catholic listeners, I know they know what I'm talking about. Like, it's a wonderful song. And like, you feel like $1,000,000 and you got everyone singing in the same way. And like, you just feel amazing. But I've also felt that singing Barrett's Privateers in the woods in Wisconsin around a fire.
It feels
Right?
the same to you.
It does, because and if you want to get biblical, it says in the Bible that where God's people gather, there is God. Okay, that I do believe. So, is the church and is religion necessary at all? No. Because what's necessary is for me to connect with humanity, to be in contact, to be curious, and to be loving, and to be generous, to share my gifts, to be expressive, to sing, to applaud, to celebrate people. These are the most human things we do, and that's where I find this feeling of connection.
Do you feel so? Where are you at spiritually then? Where does that land you spiritually? Because you're saying you're wanting this feeling of connection, which you're kind of terming God. Like they sound sort of one and the same to you, maybe, if I'm hearing it.
So where I ended up is, so going back to the binary, I'm now on the side that nothing matters except what we decide matters.
Okay.
That the universe is an uncaring entity, and I just happen to live here. And the thing is like, that's entirely freeing. Because I now there's no institution anywhere or someone, a omnipotent being who won't reveal themselves, telling me that I need to hate gay people for some reason. Like, now I can actually sit down with a gay person and be like, hey.
The church does not say to hate gay people.
No, they find extra ways to go around it, of like, love the sinner, but hate the sin. Why is this gay person sinning in the first place if they're in a loving, committed, consensual relationship?
So you think that there's no concept of sin?
I would be hard pressed to point out what I think. Like, do I believe in natural law, to get real Catholic on it for a second? Sure. I think that there's a natural order of things, but I don't think it's nearly what we wish it was.
What do you mean that you believe there's a natural order of things?
So, thou shalt not kill, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a religious dictate. Where's the boundaries of that? We have the death penalty. So, if we're a biblical nation, if we're following the 10 Commandments, death penalty has to go, right? And if we believe it, so that's one. Two would be, let's say my daughter and I are walking down the street. Dude jumps out, tries to assault my daughter, and I beat him to death. Did I just commit a sin? Well, what I did was monstrous, right? What I did was barbaric. I would also say that what I did was necessary. And I'm not going to feel bad for defending myself and my children. And so, am I sinning? No. But and then three would be, I go hunt somebody down and kill them for jollies. I would argue that's outside the natural order of things. There's no need for me to be doing that. There's something has been malformed.
Good and evil?
I would not term it good and evil. I find those terms to be way too loaded, and people are bringing far too much in with good and evil. Like we first have to sort out what's good and evil for me to discuss what's good and evil.
Sure, but do you think that there are? Because to me, what I have come to realize is that our societies largely get our moral frameworks from religion. I don't know that humans have an innate sense of morality without a set of beliefs that were taught by our society.
I mean, I believe you could certainly make that argument. I wouldn't agree with that. But I also wouldn't say that there's some sort of solid, like, I do believe that we do have an innate sense of what we would, for lack of a better term, good and evil. But if I'm going to trace and go, okay, what are the commonalities for all human societies across all cultures and times, right? We all kind of have, like, they all kind of settle in the same type of basic structure of good and evil, right? What's allowed, what's not allowed. Well, when you start to see something that's across cultures and across times and across context, I have to believe that that's somehow innate to humans. And so that's what I would point to, and to say, like, Yeah, prohibitions against murder, that's pretty common across all cultures, times, and contexts. So, killing your brethren is, the people of your tribe is almost always considered wrong. Right? Now, killing people outside your tribe, we have a different story because now you see variation.
Yeah.
Right? But in terms of the community, in terms of the tribe, you don't kill tribal members.
Well, I would think that there must be a sort of biological imperative to, in general, not kill like your family or your tribe, the people who are enabling you to survive.
Correct.
But I think that I don't know. I think that there must be something else. Like, I just think that because when you look at all, even like different cultures, different opinions on the way that they treat different people in different situations and what they consider wrong and right, it seems to really largely depend on, and especially the way we treat people outside of that tribe, it seems to largely depend on their moral framework, which is given to them by the society that they're in. This has been a major point. Like, I haven't explored it very deeply, but I've been wanting to read more and more about it because I don't know that I believe that we have an inherent sense of right and wrong. I think we might have an inherent sense biologically of, like, don't kill the people that you're depending on to feed you. But I bet that there are cases you could find that are outside of that. Because aren't there, like, there are cannibalistic societies and all sorts of things. People who sacrifice children.
Sure. I mean, in the Catholic context, you could make a theological argument that the most loving thing you can do is baptize your kid and then kill them immediately following. Like, that is a conclusion of Catholic theology.
Why?
Now, it's monstrous, but it works under the framework of what they have. And no one does that, but that would be how if we follow with here, they've got the system, they've got the right of it, this is where we go. And so, like, on that same level, if you take your child and you believe that if I sacrifice this child to the sun, the rains will come and then we won't starve to death. Well, I mean, lots of cultures have done that. I mean, that's even in the Bible where, the Israelites lose a battle because the king of the town they're laying siege to sacrifices his son on the walls of the city, thus causing their God to be stronger than the Jewish God, and therefore they lose.
Well,
right?
This is I don't know enough of theology to be able to make the argument fully, is how I'm kind of feeling. Because I feel like, because even in what you were saying earlier about the example of, like, if your daughter is being attacked and then you murder the guy who's attacking her or whatever, you're saying that would be against, like, that would be a sin. And to me, I'm not sure that...
I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying that's not, like, if I go with thou shalt not kill, and if I kill, I've committed a sin. I don't think killing somebody in self-defense is a sin.
But I thought you were saying that you would, like, theologically, it would be.
Theologically, yes. If you follow,
what I'm saying is, I don't know that. Like, I imagine that there are theologians who would not, like, who would disagree with that, even by
tons.
drawing on theology.
Correct. Because
right.
Everybody, when they come to any theological text, has to negotiate from their context, and then they're with that text, because the text itself is not speaking. The text itself is just text. So we are as people constantly renegotiating with this text that's not univocal, right? It is not inerrant. And so there are plenty of people who say, well, yeah, thou shalt not kill, but they were really just kidding. I mean, look at Joshua, he committed genocide, right? Or if again, going to my context, the Catholic theology, there's the just war doctrine, right? As written by JP2 shortly after Vatican II. So, like, that's a real thing too. There's plenty, and how many wars have been fought? How many villages destroyed? How many women raped over the idea of, like, oh, this is what God, insert whatever God you want here. And that's something that's happened universally too. There isn't a faith on the planet where that's the case. Look at, and people are like, well, the Buddhists, yeah, okay, go study Sri Lanka and get back to me. Like, or look at what Tibet was like. I mean, and Tibet's not doing better under China. Well, I guess we're just going to get you banned in China here, Dimitra. My apologies.
I don't really have a desire to go. I've never really had a desire to go to China, so I don't. Who knows? I'm
Well,
always changing. Maybe I'll one day want to go to China.
well, yeah. All right. Well, I'll try to spare you from
No, I'm
the
kidding.
wrath.
I'm not
But
going to go
the
to China.
good old West Taiwan. But like you look at like what was Tibet like before the Chinese showed up, right? Like it wasn't a paradise. I mean, they were better off than they are now. To like no bones about that. But it's not that the Buddhists were like these benevolent philosopher kings. That's not at all how that worked. And so, like that seems to be much more in my mind. A lot of what the theology is like, oh, where there's this basic thing that's all kind of evolutionarily in us, and the religion creates a framework that they can twist it to however they wish to structure it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We shouldn't I like my tribe. I'm over here. Why would I go over there and kill people? Because they're not us, and God has ordained it. Oh, well, okay. I guess that's okay. Right? Like, and that's where I differ. Like, the religion itself is not, to me, a good basis for just about anything. Right? It really is like, let's look at the human context. Let's look at what's out there. How have we existed as, if we say like, oh, well, back in the day, women were virginal and we loved life. Like, okay, let's go look. And then we find out, oh, that's actually not true. It's just part of the mythos that we've created to serve a purpose today.
But that part I don't know is necessarily true. Like, I don't think anyone is saying back in the day women were virginal and were, like, to my understanding, Christians have been more of a, especially in the beginning, were a very small minority of people.
Yes. And in the beginning, it is entirely possible that there were women priests. Right? In the Bible, in the letters of Paul, it talks about Julia, and she was a good disciple of Christ, right? Like, she was a community member. She was known. She had authority in the church. It's very clear from the readings. And at some point, we renegotiated that and decided that, no, we're going to change that. We're going to restructure power to suit our current goals.
I don't know anything about that, so I can't really say. But I do know that I have the feeling that I don't like when women are priests.
I mean, I'm with, like, here. This is when Dominique listens to this, it's just going to spark a fight. But
No, that's not what I want.
well, her and I have got her on the fast post on this. Her whole thing is that if women aren't allowed to be priests, they shouldn't be allowed to be baptized because they can't be full participants in the church. My view on it is women aren't allowed to be priests because that's how they decided to set up Catholicism. So if you want to be a priest, there are plenty of other places to go look. Right? Like it's kind of like it's like showing up to a football match with ice skates. Well, I want to use my ice skates. Well, that's not what we're here to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to use your ice skates, go somewhere else. And to be fair, like I don't particularly care for it either, but that's more because I don't care for the churches per se. Right? But I do believe that women can be teachers. I just don't think it's in all contexts.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. Is I just started doing a Bible study with this woman who she's not necessarily like teaching about the Bible, but she's leading the thing of like, oh, you read this on this day and whatever. And I like her in that role, but I would feel really like I tried out a couple churches here when I decided I wanted to start going to church, and there's a lot of very woke churches here, and also like there's a lot of Protestant style churches. There's only one Catholic church, and even that, I've never been to another Catholic service, but everything I have heard makes me think that this priest of this Catholic church is not very traditional in any way. But the first church I went to here was some sort of Anglican or I don't know, something church. And there was a woman giving the sermon, and she was sort of extrapolating whatever the verse she was reading was into like talking about her everyday life and everything. And I was just like, this isn't church to me. This is weird. I don't like it. But I don't have uh, I do not have a strong enough theological understanding to be able to back my feelings up in that way. I just feel like I don't think a woman should be the priest of the church. I don't want to go to a church where the woman is being the priest.
Yeah, I mean, and that I think that's perfectly fair, right? If for people who are religious, who do wish to go seek this, go find it where you find it, right? Like for me, at least in the Catholic context, women are banned from being priests. That's what the Pope has said. That's how the Catechism is written. It's a closed letter. Let's move on. Let's have a more of a conversation of why we're more concerned about abortion than we are about feeding the poor. That's the conversation I think we need to have. Right. The women priest thing, at least in the Catholic context, that's case closed. And I'm not saying that women can't be theological leaders. I'm just saying that the Catholic Church is set up in this way.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know where to go from here. There's so many places we go. There's so many opinions. I wanted to get your opinion on the trans stuff then, because we haven't talked about that at all.
Oh, thank God we're not being controversial here.
Well, because you, well, so to me, so I'm trying to get your understanding. So far I've learned would you describe yourself as atheist? How would you describe your labeling of spirituality? Agnostic? Atheist? What do you?
I mean, if you had asked me back in the late aughts, early 2010s, I would have said the atheist. I would not term myself that currently. And I also would not say that I'm spiritual but not religious. I don't think that that's actually a thing. What I would say is the only thing that I'm dogmatic about is that I still have more learning to do. Right? And that is like for me, I love the debate. I love I love this conversation. I'm digging every part of it. Like I'm gonna be on cloud 9 for weeks now. Like.
Well, it's nice to get to talk and disagree and find out why. Like it's very rare nowadays.
Yeah, I mean it's the intense curiosity, right? Like if there's one thing I'm convinced of, it's that I don't have all the answers and I don't know everything. And so the only way that I'm going to be able to get closer, especially if, in an evolving society, and as a father, I have a duty to my kids to evolve with it. And that's going to require me to be curious. And so like agreeing with me is not necessary. Right. I don't, in fact, some of my opinions would be the world would be a very scary place if everyone held my viewpoint. So thank God for that, if God's listening in there. But I wouldn't say that I'm an atheist, but because I can't rule it out. But what I would say is that I guess I would label myself curious. And maybe a realist at the same time, because I'm, to me, great claims require great evidence, and I want to see. Let me see it. There should be no. If we are correct in whatever our stance is, then data and facts and exploration and rhetorical debate, none of that should challenge it, because reality doesn't give a shit about what you feel. So that's kind of where I stand.
But do you think you could have faith in something that you could not materialistically measure? Or no, you would have to see the evidence? Because I understand what you're saying, that the evidence shouldn't contradict it.
So, I mean, how deep do you want to go? Well, right before I met you for the first time, I had gone to this men's event. And I had heard one of the facilitators on the podcast, or on a podcast, and he said and the actual line was, "How have you been married for 14 years and you don't know she likes to be blindfolded?" And I was like, wait, I need to go back and start from the beginning and listen to this guy's whole thing. And then I looked him up on Instagram. He's having an event. I was like, okay, yes. And I show up and it's all about emotions. I was expecting like we're dudes, we're going to be out in the woods, like we're going to go kill something and eat it. And instead it's just like, what is in your heart? Where are you emotionally constipated? Where are you not taking responsibility in your life? And I'm like, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? And what I witnessed over that weekend was one of the facilitators, who's become a friend, and he was my therapist for a number of years. I watched him do shit that was magic. And magic in the sense of, like, I, until that point, was convinced I could spreadsheet a human. If I had enough data, I could model human beings. And he's talking about contact and energy and just watching him. The thing I had to realize was I have no idea what I'm looking at. And I don't think this could be, because one of the things he said was, how do you measure relationship? How do you measure intimacy? And it was like, until he asked that question, I had never asked that question. And so I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And some people are like, see, he's channeling God. And I'm like, that's a big claim, requires big evidence. But I can empirically see something's going on here. And so I'm willing to say, okay, I'm willing to go one step further in saying, okay, there is an energy field to humans that he's manipulating somehow, and that's having an effect. You know, I can't measure that. I can't, but I can watch him do it. But I'm not willing to go to the, like, and he's channeling God. That's one step too far from what the evidence in front of me is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
like
sense.
I'm willing to go a couple of steps beyond where the evidence is willing to support if the trajectory is that way, but I have my limits.
But not too far. Do you think
Correct.
there's like a protective mechanism in that?
I mean, I can't rule that out.
Like a guarding against. And I don't know, this might not feel like it's the case for you, but something that I've noticed so I've talked to a couple people now. Well, actually, you're only the second, but who started off Christian, like grew up Christian, and then left. And the other woman was a bit of a different experience from yours because she did feel like this deep connection with God, but she was very let down by the people around her. Was how it came across to me. Like in high school, she was kicked out of her, Catholic school or whatever Christian high school she was in because she was questioning things and you weren't allowed to question. And it's all very culty in a lot of ways. Like, so she had like this real connection, but the people around her let her down, to me, in such ways that like it ruins that connection along with it because it makes you just like throw it out. You haven't necessarily said that you felt that kind of strong connection. You felt something that you've termed as like the kind of connection and love with other humans. But it also sounds to me like you were largely let down by people around you as well.
That both are true. I mean,
Yeah.
Again, if you had asked me at the time, I would have said, well, I have this deep connection with God. Like, here's what this is.
Sure.
In retrospect, as I've learned and as I've grown, you have grown, and particularly after that particular men's event.
Yeah.
Of like, that was so much more explanatory of what I experienced that I would have called God than anything else I'd ever experienced since.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me, like when it comes to the people around me, it's again, getting biblical, by your fruits you shall know them, right? If the argument is that you have this faith, you do the thing, you stand up, you sit down, you take communion, and therefore it will help you become a good person, then I should be able to look and point and go, see, good perp. When they join the church, man, shit happens. It's amazing. They're wonderful people. They're the people you could rely on, but that's not what I've seen.
Yeah.
What I've seen is the more religious they are, the less I can trust them. The more likely they are to try to steal. And, if you want to get real political about it, how many youth pastors and priests have gone to jail for pedophilia and abuse? And I grew up Catholic. We're the poster childs for it. So if really God is here in this religion place, why is that the effect?
Well, I would say that's Satan.
I mean,
infiltrated.
Then the church has been infiltrated by Satan and therefore unreliable. Why would I want to be in an institute that's being run by that guy?
Well, I wouldn't say just the church is unreliable. I would say all of society is unreliable. But I think, because I think that same thing is everywhere. But it is a big problem. So I think that we hear a lot of those stories, and I've heard a lot of experiences like the ones you name. I've also heard, though, like I was just reading a story this morning of a guy saying that he went to church and someone in his church group was really struggling. They were like drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of college debt, and they were going to become a doctor, and then they were having all these panic attacks, like realized being a doctor wasn't for them, but they had racked up all this debt and they were just like going through this hard time, and somebody in the church anonymously paid off 200 grand of debt for them. And it was like this good deed. And we have a friend who just started going to church in Vancouver and has found like this wonderful supportive group of men through his church who have like come to his stand-up comedy events, and I think gave him money for something to pay off something, like help support him. Like there's also the good there too.
I'm not debating that there isn't the good. My question is, does that good negate our inaction against the monsters in the system?
No, I think there should be action against that.
And does that good only exist in that context?
No.
And so like that's the thing, is this is not unique to religion. This is unique to humans and community.
But I think the love to me that you name in the community that you find with people is different than God.
Okay. Tell me more.
I feel them as different things. What?
Tell me more.
Well, I feel so. I do feel that spiritual connection of a deeper, I wouldn't really quite term it a being, because that was sort of my perception of Christianity before last summer when I started reading the Bible, of like, oh, Christians think that God is this man in the sky or whatever, like this thing. And to me, in Christianity, I've found a structure for the connection with this like greater energy, for lack of a better word, that I had always been following and seeking through the different like new agey, all these kinds of stuff that I did. And I found that so far to me, Christianity gives it this necessary language and structure that might not fully prevent, because the evil can still come in, but it gives a framework for good, because I do really think that there's good and evil.
Okay.
So, but I feel a larger energy of like, of life itself, that I am loved, I am held by this bigger force, which I would call God. But I do think that it's a problem, and so this has been my thing, is coming from that direction, and then looking at a lot of people, like I asked you at the beginning, who say they're Catholic, they grew up Catholic. My ex-boyfriend's mom his family's very Catholic, and his mom was not very Catholic in her treatment of me. I'll never let that go.
Let me tell you about my experience with Dominique's family.
So there's like these people, and I think of people like that, just like regular people, and I'm like, this, you can't, and I don't want to single out this person, but I'll think about particular people who like have had that identity, and I'm like, you can't tell me that this person is like mystically connecting to this divine energy, to God, to like really feeling God in this way. It seems more just like how Christianity was to my family when I was very young, which is like, it's just kind of a thing that we say we believe in. Like, that was what I saw from my parents. My parents both wore crosses. We went to church, but like, was God in my parents' lives? Were they, reading the Bible and feeling how they related to that energy and trying to live by bringing glory to God? No, it was just like a thing that we did. Like there wasn't really actually this mystical sort of undercurrent. And I think that's why people in the New Age world find it so much more accessible. Like, even just with you in the men's group, is like, you have these people who are connecting to all sorts of energies. I think I would say, both good and evil, both dark and light, and there is God there too. But I think it opens up without the Christian framework. I think it opens up to bringing in a lot of entities and dark things and things that I don't even entirely understand. But I think we're largely part of the stuff that I was in. But because more spiritual, like divine, mystical, there's more, you can like see it happening more clearly, and there's not as many rules. I think that people end up finding it there and they're like, oh, here is where I feel that. But for me, I think that there's like, for me, when I started reading the Bible and came back to Christianity, there was a sense of like, oh, like this is what I was looking for the whole time, and this is where like goodness is. Because I thought for a long time I didn't believe in good and evil, that there wasn't a distinction between the two until my whole cult experience. And then when I left that, and I was like, that's, I don't know why I
That's a
started.
lot.
I don't know what you asked. Like, I don't know why I went through the
I
whole
asked you to
thing.
tell me more.
Yeah.
I asked you to tell me more, and you told me more, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel this strong sense. And I think the other thing I felt, and maybe I don't know how you would frame this through your lens, but what I've found happened that I did not know was a thing, because when I started reading the Bible, I wasn't like, I'm going to become a Christian now. I had kept meeting different Christian people or coming across them who did not match my idea of what Christianity was. Like, I kind of thought that Christians were dumb and just like didn't really understand spiritual things fully, and like basically these people were just inexperienced and stupid, and so they needed this framework to be given to them so that they could believe in this man in the sky, whatever. And then I started meeting people who I was like, oh, this person is really smart, really cool, really well-rounded, and they have this sense of peace in them that I can feel when I talk to them because of their relationship with God. And I don't have that. And I'd be like, I want that. But I would be like, too bad for me. It's like too late for me. I'll never have that feeling. And that feeling must be fake anyway because I don't have it. And I must have it, but I have it with nature. Or I have it with like something else, was what I thought. And then finally, I bought a Bible. I didn't read it for a year. Finally, I sat down and I started reading the Bible, and I just felt like this piece of, I just read a couple of things out loud, and I just felt like this sense of calm. And I was like, this feels good. This just feels peaceful. I don't know what I think about it, but I felt this like deeper peace. And then what started happening, the more I started doing it, was that I found, I don't know when it happened in the first few months, suddenly I felt like this deep connection to God. And I was like, oh, I think I believe in God now. And then things started happening that I did not plan or want to happen, where like my likes and dislikes, this has still kept happening, have started to change. And I didn't know the rules of Christianity or like want to follow rules of Christianity, but certain stuff like dirty stuff sexually, porn, like these kinds of things that I had not had any sort of problem with before, suddenly I was like, oh, I just like doesn't feel good. I don't want this near me. Certain words, certain songs, like lyrics of songs that I loved the songs before, I was just like, oh, I felt kind of like a little old lady. Like I was just like, oh, I don't want this around me really. And it wasn't like a judgment of it or like a moral this shouldn't exist or whatever. It just was like, oh, and that has continued to happen. My newest thing, I'll just tell you, is that I told Jordan yesterday, I was like, I think I'm gonna buy a bra. I haven't worn a bra in like, I don't know, like 15, no, not that long, 10 years at least. I don't even own a bra, like a regular bra, because I've just been like, whatever, who cares? And now I'm like, I want to be a bit more modest. I don't want my nipples like showing all the time. Like, I don't want people to be able to just look at my nipples. Like, there's these things that are changing that I didn't decide on were going to change. And I found, now that I've been talking to people about their own experiences, I found this to be a very common thing that is happening when people like are discovering Christianity. So
Do you
I'm
want me to
curious.
respond?
Yeah, I want to know I mean, tell me it's all bullshit if you want. It's okay.
I'm not gonna. Well, I'm not gonna tell you it's all bullshit because I'm not gonna negate your experiences. I don't think that, like, I'm not sitting in your shoes, so I don't know what you're experiencing. What I will say though is, like, take porn for example.
Mm-hmm.
I have not. I don't think I've set foot in a church in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the Bible cover to cover about 4 years ago. It was the last time I did it. I've done it 4 or 5 times now. And porn stopped being interesting to me about 18 months ago, like entirely. And why? Well, because I found God? No, because I've gotten much more in touch with my sense of truth, because I am more in touch with my wife, because I'm more in touch with my kids. And the people who I'm walking that path with, none of them are religious. And so the thing I'd say back is like, yeah, that's great. And why is Christianity itself necessary? Because it doesn't seem like it to me.
But why,
It seems like when we start to be... What's that?
What are you defining as truth? Like, what dictates truth then if there's no God, no good?
There might not be one. I mean, that's part of the whole universe that doesn't really care. Like, I don't think that there is a truth, but I do think that there is our truth here in this place as humans. And my like, take Christianity for example. Modesty. When you're watching porn, what are you actually watching? If you believe in Louise Perry, you're just watching sexual assault. And I literally finished that book a week ago. So I hadn't had that idea, but at the same time, it's like, none of this feels clean to me.
But doesn't it not feel good even if you know it's consensual? Or you don't know necessarily?
I mean, I can't say one way or the other, because I haven't been able to sit down with somebody and have them tell me, oh yeah, here, watch this. It's me having sex. And
well, they do have, don't they make, like, there are certain brands that, aren't they, like, I don't know, like consensual sex, like they try to make like ethical porn.
If the girls do porn controversy taught us anything, it's that shit could be fake too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't necessarily trust it per se.
Okay.
My point being is that, like, okay, what's the foundations of Christianity? That you're born with original sin, and that God had to send his own son that was also him to earth to be sacrificed to pay the debt that he himself imposed. Like, that's the whole salvation arc of Christianity. So there's a couple of things there. First off, starting off with the idea that we're born bad, I don't agree with at all. But then why were we so bad that it required a sacrifice of God himself to himself in order to make that go away? In order for me to get to a place where I think I should be modest, I think I should not watch porn, I think I should be more in community, that those two things seem disconnected to me. And so what I'm arguing is not necessarily that what you're experiencing is not there. I think you're experiencing something very real. What I'm arguing is that the Christianity piece isn't necessary, but it is a framework that you were born into that that seems familiar and comforting, that makes a cultural context which makes it easier to walk the path. Had you been born in Saudi Arabia, you might be experiencing this exact same thing with the Quran. So the religion itself.
But that's what I mean by, I think the religion gives you a moral framework. I don't think that the Quran gives you the same moral framework.
Have you ever read it?
No, to be fair.
Highly recommend. I've
But
read
like
that. I've read the
the
Bhagavad Gita.
outcome doesn't look very appealing.
It looks like what Christianity was in the Middle Ages currently. Like that. Like, look at what happened with the First Crusade. You know, oh, we're burning Jewish villages down and slaughtering all the inhabitants, so as we're practicing for the Saracens. Like
I
that.
have heard people make this argument against what you're saying, but I don't know the argument, so I cannot make it. They have said that something like the Crusades were like I've heard people say what you're saying, and then I've heard Christians respond back saying like, no, the Crusades were for this purpose because of this or something, and I don't know what it is, so I cannot engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, basically the counterpoints are it was a political movement that had nothing to do with religion. It was an economic idea of trying to, secure trade routes, like early exploration and colonialism. I've heard that it's had to do with the Black Death. Also that it was an overabundance of men, like too many boys were surviving childhood and therefore didn't have access to females. And so what do you do with the boys? You send them like I was a double major in undergrad, and I was computer science and medieval history.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've heard. And if somebody wants to, jump in on the comments of the podcast and educate me, hey, I'm all here for it. My point being is that, like, if you look at what we would point out as the negative externalities of Islam, there's plenty of historical places. Like, we also have science and math because of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That Islam at the time of the Middle Ages was the place where you were having artistic expression and scientific and mathematical achievements. And that's changed over time. Right? But a lot of the Greek texts that we have, things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, we have them in part because they were preserved by the caliphates.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, they viewed, Europe, what they called the Franks, right? They viewed them as completely backwards and barbaric, and that their religion was nothing more than an affront to God because of how they practiced it. Now we can sit here in our context today and point the same way. We're just in different places.
Christians never said, I mean, I'm kind of out of my depth because I don't really know this history, but Christians never said we should go kill everybody because that's not Christian, because they're not Christian.
I would radically disagree with that. Conversion by the sword was absolutely a thing. I mean, if you read some of the stuff out of the Carolingian kings, right? This is Charlemagne, Charles the Hammer, that type of stuff. We're talking like really beginning of the Middle Ages. They're converting the Saxons by the swords.
They're converting people, like, convert or you die.
Yeah, conquest, and you can be Christian or we can kill you. Pick one.
Is that inherent though in the Bible? Like, is that part of the teachings, or was that just a thing that they did?
Was it inherent in the Quran?
Well,
I mean, I've read it. I didn't see it. I didn't see the go out and kill it.
I would like to read the Quran, to be honest. I think that I should read it because I have been talking a lot of shit about Muslims.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you to read the Quran, and I would encourage you to go find a few different imams to go talk to.
But I have listened to a lot of stuff from ex-Muslim people.
I've also listened to a lot of stuff from ex-Christians and ex-Mormons and stuff like when I was first handed the Book of Mormon, I read it and I was like, this is weird, but all the Mormons I know are really awesome people, so let's go to a ward and start talking to them. Obviously decided not to go down that path, but there's a lot of good in that church, right? Just as there is a lot of evil in that church.
Yeah. That's fair.
And so, I mean, I guess that's my argument is not is that in order to get to this place, Christianity is nothing more than a framework, one that's culturally familiar. But I don't believe it to be necessary in any way, shape, or form to get to the place you're describing.
I used to think that, and now I don't think that, because of the deeper belief that I feel that I don't quite know how to yet speak about in a theological framework, maybe. But what I've experienced over the last year has made me approach, like when you were saying earlier, like, if we all have sin, why did God need to send his son to do like these things? That question for me, before a question like that kind of felt to me, I would say it with like an eye roll, like, oh, this is so stupid, it doesn't make sense. Now it's become more of like a genuine, like, I'm like, well, why? Like, what do Christians say? Like, what, let me read books about it and find out. But I'm starting with the deeper belief and connection that's then making me want to explore those things. So I don't know where I end up. But an interesting point that I have found too is that Catholicism and Orthodoxy differ I believe, on the original sin concept, where Orthodoxy does not say, they don't frame original sin in the same way that Catholicism it does. To me, Catholicism feels a little bit too full of shame in the way that it's taught. Because in Orthodoxy, from what I understand, the concept of original sin is like, because of the fall, there is evil in the world and there is sin, but you're not born bad, as you said. Like, you're not born carrying on the sins of Adam. You're born into a world where you will sin and there is evil.
So
Whereas Catholicism seems to be more like you are born bad.
Well, I mean, like, this podcast called Impolite Company. So when I had a friend, he was getting married to this really Catholic girl, and she said, "Oh, I was raised Catholic," and without thinking, I was completely sober, but my filter between my brain and my mouth was not working, and I said, "Well, did you get the shame kink or the praise kink?" And she was like, "What?" And her fiance was with the praise kink. It's like, oh, okay, so this is actually the thing. Catholics perfected shame. Like they were very good at it for a variety of reasons. I don't know about Orthodoxy per se, but my question would be, what's the point of baptism then? Right? Because in Catholicism, the point of baptism, you're born with original sin. They call it concupiscence. You have this original sin, this blemish. You're fundamentally good, but you have this blemish, like a bruise on an apple, that if you don't wash away, will rot the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so then you go through baptism to ritualistically clean yourself and wash away the original sin, and then you're in a pure state. And if you would die in that moment, you would go directly to heaven because you're completely pure.
Yes, that would be a question to ask. I'm sure there is an answer because they have baptism. Like, I was baptized Greek Orthodox, but I know that the way that they frame original sin, there's still the concept of original sin, but it's framed differently, where it's not like, from what I understand so far, it's not framed as like, and I was just reading it actually in my Bible this morning, because it was how because of the sins of Adam and Eve, you're born into this world where there is evil, and where, because you're human, there's this tendency to sin. But it doesn't frame it as like you're born bad in this way. So I don't know then how they speak about the baptism. I would have to find out.
Well, something to look
That's
at.
Another question.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, again, it kind of comes back to, I don't think that the Christianity, Orthodoxy, whatever, I don't think any of it's necessary to find a connection with whatever spirituality there is to find. What, call it God, call it connection, call it whatever.
But you just said that you don't have a connection with the spirituality that there is.
I would say that I wouldn't define myself as spiritual. There's like what I feel and what I experience is the contact between humans.
Yeah.
And I find that out in the land, right? Like, when part of that men's event that I went to, it ended with this gentleman who, I swear, at least from a soul level, is about 4,000 years old. And he was talking about like communing with the land. And I thought that, like, this is flippin' woo-woo, right? Like, this is bullshit. But I'm going to, but everything I've seen so far this weekend has been just completely outside my, so let's just give it the good old college try. And I had an experience that I can't quite understand. Like I've spent the last 4 years of my life trying to understand what the hell I found and what I experienced and what I saw. Like I was like vision walking through this prairie in the mountains. We didn't baptize, we didn't do rosary, but it was there. And there's a question of like, okay, so if we want to try to explain it, if you're going to take a model of, oh, there's God, all right, well then God's out in the mountains, not down here where I'm living, for one, and I don't believe that. That kind of negates the idea of God. Or it could be that I'm human and I grew up and evolved with this nature thing. Like it's my context. And when I'm in my context and I'm grounded into that context, all the chatter of the modern world starts to fall away. And I'm much more in tune with who I am and me. And the land is grounding that out of me. And that's, for me specifically, is one of the biggest things. My brain is always going. Like when people are like, when you ask somebody like, oh, what do you think about it? And they're like, nothing. I can never say that because I'm always doing something unless I'm out on the land. And then all the chatter goes away and I suddenly can feel things like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh, I was wrong here. Or, oh, I'm becoming this thing. I mean, I founded my tax firm and I started writing this down. I'll just tell you the first line of what I wrote. I founded my tax firm on the advice of a storyteller, a sex coach, and a dude who lives with his horses in the woods. I will be the first to admit that it doesn't make any sense. And that's true, right?
Yeah.
That's a true statement. But I came to that conclusion literally laying in a alpine prairie outside of Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And like when it happened, it was just like you could have rang a bell, and it's like, yeah, I now have no choice but to go and to quit my job, you start this accounting firm, and start like using that to leverage into building communities and building back the human context I want my children to inherit. Like now I'm like galvanized by it. Now you can say that I found God out there, and I think that there's an argument to be made that maybe I did, but Christianity wasn't needed to get there, if that makes sense.
It does. I agree with all of that, because I had that experience before coming back to Christianity, because I do think that there were real spiritual things that I experienced over the past decade I think that God was there in many of them. And I also think that without the protection of the Christian framework, there were also a lot of evil things in there too. But I want to go back because I asked you about the trans thing, and then we started talking more about Christianity.
Man, I was really hoping that I was going to avoid that.
Which I feel like we could. I mean, I'm interested in. I feel like we could go on about Christianity for a long time, but I think we've kind of come to the point of understanding where we disagree on it. So I don't know that there's a lot more to be milked. I'm just curious. I'm curious. I want to talk about the trans and the gender, the current, all that stuff a little bit with you. I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah. So I'll go back to what I started with. My thing is that I want to live in a free society.
Yeah.
Right? And I believe that, like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, I'm an American. That is indelibly etched upon my heart. But part of freedom is people do shit I don't agree with, that I find scary and disorientating and I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my opportunity to prove if I actually believe in freedom or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to an adult, let's say that they're a male to female transition, and I know a number of these people, that's their right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have to agree with it. I don't, my opinion is not necessary. My consent isn't even necessary. If they're an adult making their own choices and that's what they want to do, well, then as an American who believes in freedom, I'm kind of obligated to defend their right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very good friend, it was actually the first trans person I met back in the mid, 2000 aughts, like you call it 2006. And then one day he shows up to practice, he pulls off his shirt and I'm like, hey, nice tits. And he was like, oh, and he looks down and he's like, oh, okay. I guess I can tell you now I'm having transition surgery in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, Okay. Are you on the list to fight tonight? And that was the whole conversation. And after that person transitioned, they were still part of my friend circle. And it was just all kind of like, okay, and moved over. And there's a couple things there. Like, I'm not going to tell that person that they have to live their life how they're going to live, for one. But for two, they chose a side of the fence, right? And they behaved in a female context. There was no obligation in that particular place for me to do anything other than to yes and move on with life. There was no kabuki theater. There was no kissing the ring. And if you didn't accept that person, then you didn't have to accept that person. And they just dealt with it. There was no obligation on me for their choices, which is radically different than what I think we're seeing now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Now we have this thing of, well, I'm a genderful, transgenic, mask-presenting, dominant, magical being who is genderful in all ways. My pronouns are this laundry list of shit that I can barely pronounce. And if you don't go along with exactly how I wish you to behave, you're wrong. The problem there is not that they wish to live that way. I actually don't give a shit. The problem is that they created an obligation on me, that I have to change how I'm doing things, and I have to change how I'm raising my kids. And that's over the line, because freedom goes both directions. You don't have to agree with how I raise my kids, but unless I'm harming them, stay the fuck out of it. And so when it comes to that transgender thing, like, I have a lot of sympathy for people who want to live a certain way. And so I'm willing to go to bat for freedom. I draw the line on when we create this labyrinthine system of obligations in which me as Dylan, if I step one thing out of line, I'm transphobic and I have to be destroyed and forgotten. Like, I don't think is okay. And the bigger argument of like, well, I don't have to educate you. Yes, you do. Right? During the civil rights, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X spent a lot of time saying, we're going to try to move into mainstream society and we have to educate all the white folk to figure this shit out. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
If you're going to sit down and tell me, hey, I'm actually transitioning one way or the other, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to accept you, but I have some questions, I would expect them to be able to say, well, I'm breaking frame, I'm breaking context, and I'm going to help you along in figuring out how this works. If they're willing to do that, I'm all in. If they're not willing to do that, then I don't have any time for it. All that said, I draw the line very emphatically at kids.
Yeah.
Kids have no business being on puberty blockers or any of this other crap for a variety of reasons, in part because medically they're being lied to, right? You get a window for puberty. We're permanently changing these kids. We're signing, particularly girls, we're signing them up for early onset osteoporosis. Those are verifiable scientific facts. And the facts don't care about your feelings, right? And so I would say that, like, these kids, they're too impressionable, especially if you have a parent who wants to virtue signal into their group. It's the same thing when parents put their kids up to be baptized at church. They're virtue signaling to a group. It's easier to see on the trans side of things, but it happens all over the place. So that's where I draw my line, is like, after you're a consenting adult who can make your own decisions, so long as you're not creating an obligation for me, I don't got shit to say about it. And I will defend your right to live that way.
Would you group like the men and women's bathrooms, men and women's sports into those things too, as like infringing?
So the bathroom thing, well, okay, I'm a very broad, muscular, heavy dude.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of what's in the bathroom. So right. I don't necessarily have, I think, the right to really talk about that too much.
Yeah.
Simply because I don't experience the danger that someone else might.
Well, also, you wouldn't really, I don't think there's many men who are experiencing danger at a woman pretending to be a man being in a man's bathroom.
Exactly my point.
Different experience. You're probably just like, okay.
I mean, like, if a woman wants to come over and use the urinal next to me, I'm not gonna yuck her yum, right? Like, if that's how you want to do that, like, me personally, don't give a shit. Now, men and women's spaces, that's a harder, like, maybe it's the patriarchal part of my masculine side of, like, I believe that single sex areas should exist. I believe women should have privacy in those places. What I would prefer to see is, like, let's just go with it, and we'll just have a third option that's anything you need. And so that then everyone's got some place to go. And then we can just completely divorce this. The sports thing, though, is a little bit of a different story for a variety of reasons for me. For one, if the argument from the left, and I've heard this argument a number of times that, women are weaker than men because they're socialized to be weaker and submissive. If it's an absolutely stupid argument that bears no semblance to any of the data or reality. But if that's the case, then we were basically telling all the women athletes who are at the top of their game that they're lazy because they could be competing in the men's division. So if that's actually what you believe, let's go all the way with your belief and just eliminate genders in sports, and whoever wants to compete can compete.
Yeah.
This will make powerlifting and boxing and sprinting comical. Like, there was a group of guys here in Colorado who joined you are whatever gender you identify with. So all these guys went and registered themselves as females, and they had their hair in bows, but they had these gigantic beards, and they're just putting up ridiculous levels of steel on like the deadlift and the bench press, and like they swept it. The top 10 places in this powerlifting competition for women was all these dudes. The podium picture is hilarious.
So they did it on purpose? Like they did?
Yeah. To prove that this was dumb.
It's like a protest.
Yeah. The one guy, he's got this big beard. I mean, he looks like a biker, and his beard is braided, and he's got silk bows in it. It's comical. So there's a serious question in that place, right?
Yeah.
I, out of the box, am just stronger than most females.
Yeah.
And so you want to put me up in jiu-jitsu. When I compete in jiu-jitsu, if a woman wants to compete with me, I will treat them as an equal. But also understand that I am 300 pounds, you are 100 pounds, and I will throw you across this room, right? But I'm also never going to shame her for not stepping in with me.
Yeah.
Because, I get it.
Yeah.
So, with the sports thing, it just really is, do we want women to compete? If that's the case, maybe we need to have a third area, or maybe we get rid of genders altogether. I don't really know what the answer here is. But I don't think, the biological reality is, you're basically killing women's sports.
Yeah.
And again, I have 2 daughters. My oldest is on my hardware for sure, because she's almost as tall as me at age 12. And she's as broad in the shoulders as me at age 12. And her major interest right now is she wants to power lift.
Yeah.
Well, if she could become a champion and that's where she finds her love, I want her to be able to pursue that. And I don't want some dude with his beard and bows taking that away from her.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded explanation to say it's really fucking complicated, but at the same time, there are lines. Men and women are emphatically different, and we're different out of the box, and we need to stop with this idea that we're not. Because as much as I might wish that my daughters could do anything, they can't, and part of the reason they can't is because they're female.
So here's a question for you. You said earlier you think feminism came out of capitalism. If we did not have capitalism, if we didn't have the same issues with capitalism that you see today, basically my question is, do you think women in an ideal society should be working like men?
I think women in an ideal society should have an option that's equally as dignified.
What do you mean? How could they have an option?
So, and I think of some of my aunts who were like old school second wave feminists, right? These are the women, the descendants of Rosie the Riveter, who are cracking the ramparts into the corporate world. That's who these women were. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they said was the most important thing in a woman's life is her career. I've heard those words. And I said, well, do you think that ever changes? And she goes, that is always the most important thing in a woman's life. And they were saying this because they're like, I have no obligation to get married. I have no obligation to have kids. And none of them had kids. Yeah. Many of them. But what's interesting, though, is they're like mothers to me. They raised me instead of the other kids that are around there. And so they faced a lot of resistance. Like when my dad married my mom, one of the things that my grandmother made my father promise was that my mother would finish her degree so that she would have an out if she ever needed it because she would be educated. My dad, and that he was not to knock her up before she was done with that degree. And he fulfilled that. He made that happen. My mom finished her degree. My dad does not have a degree, and she worked at the same job. She got her first job in 1978, and she retired 2 years ago from that same job. So like good for her. And she took a lot of shit for that, right? And then when she was working part-time, she took a lot of shit from the feminists being like, why are you working part-time? Well, because I want to be there for my kids. My mother went to literally every school picnic. She was at every play. She was heavily involved because she worked part-time. And truth be told, my dad was there too, right? So like I was very blessed with that. But my father took shit for letting my mom work, and she took shit for only working part-time. And the ideal society for me is, why is this even an issue? If she wishes to work part-time, that should be honored and dignified. If she wanted to stay home and be a housewife, that should be honored and dignified. And if she wants to not have kids and not get married and have her career, that should also be honored and dignified. That's how freedom would work.
Yeah. We've really moved away, I think. I mean, do you think it's sad that we've moved away from the value of family in society?
I think it's horrendously anti-human that we've done that. And I think
Yeah.
I think it's an inevitable outcome of, well, quite frankly, I think it's I think this was a natural and inevitable outcome of deciding that we wanted to build a suburban car-centric society. I think there's a direct, bright, shiny line between our decision to go all in the suburbs and the dissolution of families.
Yeah. Dominique said that too, I remember. So what is there a way, like, what do you do now? Because we already made that decision, right? Like all our cities, everything's set up that way.
Well, we bulldozed our cities. We bulldozed our cities to make it into a car-centric concrete hellscape.
Right.
And like when people talk about like 15-minute cities, right? The idea that everything you need is walkable within 15 minutes, and people, on the right will be like, the government, have your hand to the government, get in the pod and eat your bug. Well, the problem is the suburbs are far more planned than what the 15-minute cities would be, and they're far more enforced by the government. I'm sitting on a 1/4 acre of land. This is mine. I bought it, right? Except I can't do anything with it except with what is exactly here. If my house burnt to the ground, I couldn't build a different house. Zoning laws mean that the house that's there is the house that will always be there.
What? Wait, what do you mean? If your house burned down, you couldn't build another one?
No, I could only build exactly the house that's there.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't be like, oh, let's find a new floor
change it
plan.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't do that. We have a housing crisis. I can't build an ADU. I have plenty of room. I could put up at least probably 3 ADUs in my backyard. And I want to.
What's that?
Auxiliary dwelling units.
Oh,
Making little apartments in my backyard.
yeah. Okay.
Right? But it's illegal. I can't do that. So like the suburban housing experiment is locked up. We built these things and went, oh yeah, they're perfect just the way they are, and they can never change. And economically speaking, what's crazy is like my property taxes, and I have very low property taxes. My property taxes here are like $2,500 a year.
Okay.
Okay. And that's wonderful, right? From a cost standpoint, but it also means I'm heavily subsidized because my property taxes do not pay for the infrastructure required for me to have the house here. The water, the gas, the electricity, the roads, all that stuff is debt financed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to change it, stop subsidizing it. Stop subsidizing the houses, stop subsidizing, because I live in subsidized housing. When I was renting an apartment in downtown, that was cash flowing. That was cash positive for the municipality. And so my property taxes that I was paying through my landlord for that property were actually then being moved out to the suburbs to be able to fix their infrastructure that's crumbling. We essentially have organized society to be around the least efficient, most expensive transportation system possible. And so, like, stop subsidizing it. My property taxes, and I actually ran the numbers for my house specifically, I would have to pay $17,000 a year to pay for my infrastructure for the municipality to break even. I'm paying $2,500. I'd have to pay $17,000.
Wow.
And then on top of that, like, I drive a very fuel efficient car. The guy across the street drives a gigantic pickup truck. Why does he drive a pickup truck? Because gas is $2.75 here in Colorado right now. But if it would, but that's only that low because of how many we spend trillions in subsidies for fuel. So if we want to have a market, we should let the price of gas be what the price of gas actually is, which means that it would, in the United States, it'd be somewhere between $7 to $12 a gallon. That kind of changes the equation, right? Now suddenly long commutes and suburban sprawl, it doesn't make any sense. The only reason we're able to do this is because we have large levels of government control and government subsidies that are driving us ever further apart into ever smaller boxes and ever farther away from everyone else.
Can you go back from that?
We went this way. We had a walkable communities with large levels of public transit, with people in the street. Like, the streets were for people, not for cars.
Yeah.
And it has been a concerted effort and directed policies of the federal government in the United States and in Canada to destroy all that.
Gosh. It would be so nice to be able to have a walkable city like that.
Well, think about this from a family formation standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have 2 kids. My only regret, Demetra, about having kids is that I do not have more.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my only regret. And part of the equation that Dominique and I had to run when we were getting ready to have our 3rd kid was, we can't afford a bigger car. Like, we simply could not afford a bigger car, and we would have needed to upgrade. We looked at used cars. I went around and I talked to people about, can you give me a loan? But we simply could not afford it.
But what do you think about people who say, like, it's pretty well documented that poor people have the most kids?
That's shifting.
It might be shifting, but it just also seems like historically and just like not very long ago, people, and just I think still today, the poorest people have the most children, and the richest people tend to, like, a lot of people I know are having like 1 or 2 kids.
Yeah.
Who are there?
Dominique and I sat down and figured out that in our friend group, our reproductive rate is like 0.2.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy talk. My point being is that, like, yeah, maybe poor people are having more kids, which then leads to baby boomers saying that you should never have kids unless you're financially stable. Well, I didn't achieve financial stability until about 4 years ago. My oldest daughter is 12.
To me, that's more of the problem, is sort of like the narrative of like why didn't Jordan and I start having kids like 5 years ago? Like, because we felt like, oh, we haven't had enough like life experience yet, and we're not, like, Jordan wanted to be so financially ready and we were perfectly financially ready to have kids, but it was like the idea of, like, I want to have all of the money I'm ever going to spend on this child in the bank so I, like, feel safe and ready to go. Like, there was just this, like, but I think it was because nobody modeled to us. No one was like, have a bunch of kids and have them early. That's the best thing that you'll ever do.
Sure. And like, let's just play that out.
Yeah.
Right? If Dominique's family listens to this. So Dominique's mother is the middle of 17 kids. Right?
Yeah.
Her grandma used to
Yeah.
Yeah, her grandma used to say all the time, like, oh, society's so obsessed with sex. And I'm like, have you looked around? Because I think it might be you.
Yeah.
Right? But like, they also have an entire city block in Peoria, Illinois, where there's aunts and uncles all over the place. Having lots of kids meant very little to them, because eventually the oldest kids start raising them, but there's also all these other women around who are also having kids, and they create herds of kids, and they look at all of these different pieces, right? Look at what's happened with the suburbs. You took women like my grandmother away from all of her aunts, all of her mom, and everyone else, and then put her in a little box in the suburbs, and then she started having kids, and now there's no one for her to offload the kid for, no one to share chores with. Everything's now atomized and cloistered, which means that the cost per kid starts escalating, right? Both in time and money. Whereas, like, you know, for her growing up, she talked about all the time, like, she go visit her aunt, and then pretty soon she's having dinner, which means that her aunt is bearing the cost of feeding her rather than her mom. And so, as we've suburbanized and atomized, we've removed women from their support groups. And so now kids are extremely costly.
Yeah.
You know, and my wife is an amazing woman. She's a career woman. Until very recently, she's always made more money than me.
Mm-hmm.
She's got her PhD. She's fucking amazing. And having kids is a huge strain on her because she doesn't have the supports around her.
Yeah.
And we live with a roommate who is a lovely person, who's a dear friend, and she picks up dinners on some nights and stuff like that. That is the human context. My kids are healthier because there's another woman around. My kids would be healthier as much as it might drive me insane to have my mother move next door. It would actually be quite of a benefit for my kids and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
We're not meant to live in little boxes that are separated out in government-controlled warrens, and then our only option to go see anyone else is to go out of our living box and into our moving box to go to a third box where we have to pay to be there. That's what our current society is set up for. So if we don't want that anymore, to me, it's not financially sustainable, and we're blowing money out the windows. It's anti-human. It's leading to depression. It leads to obesity. It leads to a lack of kids. So how did we get here? We spent our way into it. How do we want to get out of it? Well, we stop with the insanity. That's
I haven't really heard people talking about that popularly. Like,
well, when I pitched you on me being on the podcast, that was the thing I just brought up.
well, yeah.
It's
Yeah. Go ahead.
it's the topic when I start pointing out that, like, oh, you drive a Ford F-150. Like, first off, financially and logically and economically, that's the stupidest car you could possibly buy unless you're a construction worker. And
I have a pickup truck, so just
hey, that's great for you. Like, I'm not saying people shouldn't buy them. I'm just saying it doesn't make a whole lot of sense economically.
Yeah.
You also live in a rural area. I live in a suburb.
I had a pickup truck even when I lived back in Pennsylvania. But go ahead.
I had a pickup truck when I lived in Milwaukee, and then I realized how much money I was spending on gas, and I traded it in for a
I
Toyota
just
Corolla.
love them.
I get it.
But you're saying.
I mean, my point being is that, like, that's a heavily subsidized vehicle. I don't know what it is in Canada, but in the United States, if you're driving that, you are driving one of the most government subsidized vehicles on the road.
Uh-huh.
And there's a ton of negative externalities for that.
But
So,
what
and
I
then
mean,
people are
I
like,
don't hear anyone in the government like discussing this exact topic, unless I just haven't been listening to the right people.
I mean, at least at the federal and state levels, that's a great way to find yourself unelected. It's not a very popular opinion, but there is an increasingly grassroots people, and I'm one of them, who are starting to go to city halls and starting to say things like, hey, I'm an accountant, and I was looking over your financial statements, and I noticed that on your balance sheet, there's no accrued liabilities. That's not correct. Can we correct these to include all the infrastructure debt that your new suburbs are incurring on future generations in my town?
Did you do that exactly?
Oh, yeah.
Ha! What did they say?
Oh, I got booed.
By the room or by the?
Oh, yeah. By the room. I was
Why?
easily the youngest person in the room because I'm basically arguing that the suburbs are an economic disaster. Because in the city councilors, like, here's the thing. They know this. They know that if they put that on there, it's going to look horrible. They know that we cannot afford the suburbs. They
Why
know
do
this.
the old people in the room not want to hear that?
Well, because they don't want to see anything change.
Oh.
Because they were like, why do we have minimum lot sizes? Like I said, I got a quarter acre. Every lot here is a quarter acre. Why do we have minimum lot sizes? Why do we have setbacks? Well, originally we had them for racism, because that drove the cost of housing above what the black people could afford. And again, it's not conspiracy theory if you write it down and publish it. It's in the 1954 FHA manual as to why they did it.
Okay.
So, like, explicitly, that is why. What now, is that why we still do it? No, it's not. We still do it because so much of baby boomer wealth is tied up in housing.
Ah.
And so if I was allowed to put my 4 ADUs up in my backyard, what would that do to the price of housing in the area? Well, my lot would become more valuable, but everything around it would become less, because now there's greater supply of housing.
Right.
In a capitalistic society, that's what we should want, but we don't. The suburbs aren't capitalistic. They're extremely socialistic. My house is government protected.
Interesting. But that doesn't seem like a socialistic, like, framework to the person that wants that. Like the person whose money is tied up in the land is thinking about themselves.
Yes. And they're thinking of themselves and how the government can make sure to protect their money.
But isn't that more interesting? I guess I would see that sort of opinion as more like capitalist.
That the government should tell me what I can and
But
cannot
it's
build on
not
my lot?
because of the government telling you, "Oh, I see.
Exactly.
Interesting."
Exactly. My pitch, because I have a very conservative city council, my pitch is always towards the conservative side of things. I'm asking you to remove the heavy boot of the Westminster city government off my neck so that I, as a landowner, can do with my land as I please.
Yeah.
And if I were to win that argument, the first thing I'm doing is moving my entire family out of the house, and the second thing I'm doing is bulldozing the entire lot because I'm going to put up 4 townhomes on this lot. And therefore I would take my current lot, which has 1 house on it, 1 dwelling for 1 family, and I would then quadruple it over the course of a year. And so, like, this is how humans have always built their cities. They've always gone organic. Like in my
Are you in
hometown
a
of
city? Aren't you
what's
not?
that?
Are you in a city? No.
No, I'm in the suburb. As much as I hate suburbs, I have no other choice.
But do you
So
hate
that's
cities?
I hate cities that are car dependent hellscapes, but I've
Because
also been
part
in
of me
cities.
then feels like if you're gonna put up all those, I wouldn't want, like, I'm thinking here we're so rural, I wouldn't want everyone to just start putting many houses on all their plots of land.
But that's exactly the point, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically putting out, and I'm not saying this is you, but you're the same idea is why I got booed,
Yeah.
right? Because they're like, well, I don't want that here. We have to protect the character of the neighborhood. What fucking character? All the houses look exactly the same. We have the same colors. We have the same floor plans. Every cul-de-sac has the exact same order of houses. There's nothing. There's no character out here. And here's the thing. I could put up 4 skinnies, 4 townhomes here that look just like everything else.
I
Right? I
see.
could and completely preserve the character of the neighborhood and increase housing and make sure things are more affordable and make myself rich all at the same time. How is that not capitalist? But I can't because of rock solid, ironclad government regulation telling me, no, you can't do with your land as you please.
But what if everybody did that? Because so this is like the biggest debate on our island because there's no housing and people want there to be more housing, but other people don't because it's such a like beautiful wild place and they don't want it to be ruined. Uh, because part of me is like, well, what if everyone just started doing all what they wanted? Wouldn't it? Couldn't it ruin it?
Sure, but we're already doing that, right?
Oh,
I live near some amazing prairies in the foothills of the Rockies. Like I love taking my dog out in the prairies, let him off leash. I'm not supposed to, but I do, and he runs like an idiot. It's the most amazing thing in the world. The problem is it's all being bulldozed for suburbs. So all that wild spaces, all that farm, like when I go home to see my folks, more and more farmland is now a condominium. It's now a suburb
yeah.
because that's all we can do. Whereas if we were allowed things to happen more organically, much more on the free market side of things, housing will go in near where the jobs are, which is how that has always gone throughout all of human history. We start putting houses up next to and then if there's more demand for housing, people just start they rip down things, they build it. This is how Chicago was built. Like
Hmm.
my hometown of Kenosha, there's a ton of duplexes and triplexes where people took their attics and turned them into apartments. Right? Why? Because Kenosha was booming. All the factories were there and people were moving in. And so, what was a single family resident now is a duplex. So now that's and then they locked it up with zoning laws. Now you can't do that anymore. And all these other ones were grandfathered in. But this is why you see that type of behavior very prevalently on the east side of the Mississippi, where the cities are older, pre-car dependency of the 1950s, versus the west, which is mostly built after. So my argument would be people wouldn't necessarily want to move out to your island if Vancouver and Victoria got their shit together and allowed organic development in the cities, so that you had an option between a single family residence or a filing cabinet for humans. Where's the middle in there?
Do you know something funny happened? I was reading where, because Vancouver's a Have you been to Vancouver?
No, my brother
Vancouver?
just recently moved from Victoria to London.
Oh,
Um, So I'm not going to be. I was hoping to go visit him this month, but
Oh, uh, Vancouver is a beautiful city, but they do have a lot of restrictions to keep it so beautiful. And but what's funny, I think, is that I read a story recently where I might have told this story in a different episode I did, where they, like, indigenous people have special, they don't have to follow all the rules. And so they gave the indigenous people this plot of land in the city or something where it was like, you're allowed to do what you want with it. And the indigenous people right away, they built like a huge like skyscraper kind of type of building, just like massive, like that no one else around there is allowed to build. And I think it was a funny story because I think that, like, a lot of people who think like colonialists are bad and indigenous people are so good and they care about the land and all this stuff, it was like the first thing the indigenous people, the tribe, did was just like build a big building so they can make money and sustain themselves. And it was just funny because no one else is allowed to do that.
yeah, I like without commenting on the First Nations people. What I find funny is what I'm advocating for in this organic growth is what, like, a city like San Francisco. That's how it developed. And when they started saying we should building more housing, they were like, no, this is a historical district, and they had all these like buildings on the corners where there's like a little bodega and there's like 2 floors of apartments above them, and they have like crenulations on. They're really beautiful buildings. And they're like, this is the character, and you're gonna damage the character. And the developers were like, no, we want to build that very building right next to it, looking just like it, matches to everything. And it turned out that San Francisco zoning laws mean that building those buildings, the ones that they were pointing to as the character of the neighborhood, is illegal to build in San Francisco.
Oh, got it.
So, like, this is where we're at with housing. And to me, when you look at it and you say, like, okay, capitalism, like, it's very like, developers made away like bandits on this. And it was very good for economies because now, instead of having a group of people sharing a blender, everybody now needs their own blender. Instead of everyone going to one theater to watch a movie, everyone has to have their big TVs, right? So you're creating demand for these things. Now women are completely isolated and lonely. Now they want to go to work, but because of the demand, because they're all spread out and there's no one else to watch the kids, now they need to not have kids. So now, now this is why corporations love things like birth control, because now the women will work long. Like, you can see where this starts to go, and it's all amplified by this cloistering effect we have of suburban development.
You told me when we first spoke that that Dominique says this is a slippery slope into Dylan as senator, and that she's not wrong. Is that true?
I mean, I have spent I was very politically active until 2016. I went in to go campaign for a particular campaign in 2016 and was told that I was not what they were looking for to support that campaign. And that was, so I didn't campaign that year.
Are you going to tell us
What's
who?
that? I was going to campaign for Clinton.
Why weren't you what they were looking for?
Okay, so to quote the woman, if it's male and pale, it's stale.
All right. How about
and so,
that?
like, I actually won a storytelling competition right after the election, talking about the need to talk to people, and that if we want to live in a diverse society, we need to come to terms with that I'm part of diversity. Me specifically, straight white dude. I'm part of diversity. I need a voice too. So should women be at the table? Yes. Should Black people and First Nations people and gay people all be at the yes, but I should be too. Like, I'm part of this makeup, and if I'm not, then you've drawn the battle lines such that I'm now your enemies. And if nothing else, like, my cultural heritage is, if you name me enemy, I'm going to fight you. And so, like, I prefer to cooperate, but if you want to go to war, like, that's a poor decision making on your part. But yeah, that was when I stopped being politically active, because I wasn't what they were looking for. And the second time I tried since that point was actually here in Westminster. There were 3 open seats on the city council. For the more left side of the spectrum to take it, they needed all 3 seats, but they were only running 2 candidates. And I was like, well, I'll let me join. I'll be the 3rd candidate. We can do this. We can take it over. We can pass, because my big thing was the water, the reservoir. I don't think that we should be having lawns in an area where lawns don't grow. So I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'll come door knocking. Like, this will be great. And they were like, you're just not what we're looking for to run. And those 2 people, they won by a landslide. Like, they were far. So if they had just a 3rd person on that ticket, they would have taken over the city council. So they would rather be principled and lose than allow me to participate and win. And so my reluctance to get into politics at this point has more to do with I want to deal with the issues, not with the bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, I continue to look at my kids, and I continue to look at society, and I continue to look and be like, if not me, who? Because me not showing up to the local city council is ceding all of the decision making for the city to the old biddies and betties who will die before the horrible consequences of their decisions come to roost. I'm ceding my children's future to them.
Yeah.
And I just, when my kids can't afford a house and they have to, they can't afford to live in the area they grew up, I don't want to have to look at them and say, yeah, I failed to do anything about that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling more and more strongly about it. And so if I had to guess, I guess that I would guess that at some point some city councilor is going to piss me off, and I'm going to run against them. And if I win, that'll probably catapult me into higher and higher office. Because I actually think right now that there's such a, like, why did Trump get elected? Because people are fucking fed up.
Yeah.
Right? People know shit isn't going well, and the Democratic, not to get too political, but like the difference between a Democrat and a Republican is a Democrat sucks and a Republican blows. But like it's the Democrats are just like, we're normal and everything can stay the same, and it's like, dude, we're all fucking drowning.
Yeah.
So if you have 100% chance of failure with the Democrats of things getting better, or you have a 0.001% chance with Trump, people are going to take the opportunity to maybe hit it lucky.
Yeah.
And so, like, where is the other side of this? Are people going to stand up and say, I actually don't think it's left versus right, it's up versus down? We need to start. Why is it that I can't build shit in my house? You own the land. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't we want this as freedom-loving people? Or to look at it and, maybe America needs an accountant. Where are our liabilities? Why are they not on this balance sheet? Is it because we're hiding something and it's inconvenient? Oh, you don't like that? Well, then fuck yourself. Like, and here's the thing, is that as I've gotten older, I've gotten less polite.
Yeah.
Like, as I've gotten older, I maybe I'm just becoming a crotchety old man, but like, I had my whole life being told, keep your head down, be quiet. You know what that's led me to? A lot of bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, like, I kind of look at it. It's always funny when I see baby boomers put this out of like, oh, well, hard times create, good men, and good men create, good times, and good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times. And I was like, it's the hard times are now, the baby boomers were the weak men. I hate to break it to you, but that's the case. So if we have to fight, let it be over my head so my children can live in peace. And like, that's my intensity. That's one of my gifts in the world. I don't have to be comfortable with that. I just have to deal with that reality.
I understand that element. That's beautiful. Thank you. I think that's a really great place to wrap up. Is there anything you want to say that we didn't get to say? Or
I have to tell you, I really thought you were going to end with the gun question.
The gun? Oh, like I did with Dominique?
Yeah.
Well, I know how
you caught her so off guard with that question.
That's the thing. I caught you off guard with the Jesuit question, maybe more.
Oh, yeah, totally. I was ready to sit here and talk about systems, and you hit me with religion right out of the gate. I love it.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about this podcast is for me that I get to just ask whatever I'm curious about. And I'm like, the moment I find out a person has like an interesting backstory or an interest, I'm just like, well, we have to go into that because now I want to know. But you can tell me about guns if you'd like, but I know that you like guns and you've sent me photos of your dead pigs. So I don't have any further questions.
Well, okay, so first off, those pigs are now sausage, and the sausage is delicious.
Yeah,
My
and
dog,
I'm
my
really, really jealous, I just want to say, because, it's hard because they're wild pigs, right?
yeah,
And it's hard to get like good pork meat.
I'll tell you what, wild pigs taste radically different than store bought pork. It's an amazing thing. Um, but one thing I did want to tell you, just because I know she's going to listen to it, the thing that I wish that she had said to you when you asked her the gun question. For Christmas, I bought her all the pieces of an AR-15 and built one with her. And so when she's sitting there saying like, "Oh, I have some experience," she's built her own gun.
Why didn't she tell me that, do you think?
I asked her, and she was like, "Well, I just didn't think of it." And I was like, "Honey," like I literally sent that picture to her brothers, and they were like, "What have you done with our sister?" Like,
Well, now I'm like, I want to build a gun. Wow, that's cool.
if you and Jordan find yourself here in Denver, Colorado, I will take you out to the long range shooting range that I'm a member of. I will help you both
Oh my
build your
gosh,
own guns. I think we would have a riot.
we would have so much fun. Well, we'll see. You know, who knows when we're gonna move. Part of me secretly wants to, Jordan doesn't know this yet, but part of me secretly wants to drive across the country uh when we go to the East Coast. Like after we sell our house, we've been talking about flying because we're both like, no, neither of us wants to do that drive. But part of me secretly a little bit wants to do the drive. So I don't know. Maybe we'll end up driving
Depending
through.
on timing, I will make you this offer. If you need someone to drive the big truck, I've done more than my fair share of cross country trucking. So,
Well, we're not gonna, I don't think, well, I guess that's a good point too. What car, we were gonna sell both of our cars.
hmm,
So I guess we would, oh, are you saying like a moving truck?
yeah.
Oh, well, we're selling like all of our things.
Oh,
So
that's a good way to
ideally,
move.
all of our things will fit in a little car, is like how we're sort of
Oh,
planning
that's
to
so
do it.
cool.
I want to get rid of everything.
I
That's
like
what
it.
Jordan thinks it's so funny because I've like become a minimalist. The more stuff we throw out, the more I'm like, let's throw out more things. So, uh, yeah. So it will fit in a car. I just, I don't know. Jordan will be hard pressed to agree to that decision, but my adventurous side, and I don't really want to do it either because it would suck to sit in the car for that long, but a little bit part of me does. So maybe
It's a
we'll,
great way to see things, especially like in the United States. Like, yeah, if you plan it right, there's so many, especially, well, I can speak between Vancouver and here. There's so many
yeah.
national parks and things. Once you hit Nebraska, you're basically
Ugh.
it's horrible until you cross the Mississippi.
But I've done the drive twice. I've gone once directly across the middle from like Pennsylvania to Utah, and then I've done it once from Pennsylvania down to Georgia, and then across the south to California. But I've never gone like across the north and then like down. So part of me is curious. I had another woman on this show who's from she grew up in North Dakota or South Dakota, one of those. And I was like, I've never been there. What is it like? And then part of me was like, maybe we could drive through it, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see if it happens.
North Dakota, far less interesting than Kansas.
What, really?
Yeah, I've driven
I
all three
think.
of those routes.
Oh,
It's, I mean, if nothing else, like when I was going across North Dakota, all I could think of is what it was like to take a wagon across this,
yeah.
right? Like just the months of nothing but sky and horizon with the winds,
Yeah.
and like, wow, like that took some spinal fortitude. It's
Yeah.
kind of incredible.
Did your
I think
ancestors do that? Or no? How did
No,
you?
they did not. My ancestors arrived in Connecticut. All four parts of my emigre past arrived in Connecticut. Half of them bought cattle and drove them from Connecticut to Cadott, Wisconsin.
Huh.
And so the family farm, the Schneider family farm, is still there, and still owned by the family. Different
Wow.
branch than mine. The other half ended up in Kenosha because that's where the land grants were. And if you go and you look you look up the Bain wagon that was built by my ancestor Edward Bain. There's in Kenosha, there's Bain Station Road, and Bain Station Road is where they lined up all the wagons before they shipped them down to St. Louis for people who were moving west. So my connection to westward expansion has more to do with industry than actually going out there to find stuff.
Wow. That's still cool, though. It's cool to
Yeah.
think about all of that.
In my hometown, I like to say I have so much street cred they put my name on the signs. There was a Bain Middle School, there's a Bain Park, there's a Bain, Bain Station Road. So, fun
Cool.
stuff.
Do you, is your accounting stuff like online for, do you want me to plug? You want what if people are looking for an accountant? Can they hire you, or are you more of like a local thing?
Oh no, I have clients. I have everything from a law firm in California to a distillery in Maine and everywhere in between.
Okay, so if someone's looking for an accountant and they hear all of your opinions on this show and they're like, this is my guy, they could reach out to you.
If they're like, "Wow, that guy has an interesting perspective on God," you know what I need? I need him to do my taxes.
You never know. Someone might listen to this and they might be like, I'm actually looking for an accountant.
I mean, they're welcome to find me. And I will be happy to give you the
Okay.
contact information. The big way that we run our firm, it's called True North CPAs. We both myself and my business partner, we live very much out loud. And there are people who will say, "Well, that's not good for marketing," and I'll tell you that it's actually been great for marketing, because the people who decide who meet me in my fullness and who I am, make the decision to do business with me. They're very loyal. They love the living crap out of me, and they're definitely my people. And if they don't like it, well, there's plenty of work out there for me.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Alrighty.
Well, thank
Thank you
you
so much for a
so
wonderful
much.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you.